יוסי, תודה רבה שבאת. לחיים. Like every Leil Shishi, already the third Leil Shishi, Chazoke, that we have a Moshiach, the Geula Shir by Rabbi Krasyansky, Ashliach in Manhattan. And we're going to begin. There is nothing better to begin a Farbrengen of Alef Nishnas Amel Ve'esrim than a Moshiach Geula Shir. This is what we want by Alef Nissen. And the reason why we made the Farbrengen of Alef Nissen a few days before is because we want Moshiach should be in this gala also a few days before. So Rabbi Krasyansky, please, the mic is deine. Sei uns behane mit Moshiach Geula Shir, please.
This is going to be a little. Does it work? Oh.
But let me make it higher. Closer.
Say.
But obviously, you should talk like this. We'll hear you better than in the those.
Hello. Okay.
Oh.
In any event. So this Mashiach Shir is going to be a little more Hamish than previous ones, being that it's a Chassidish Farbrengen. And as Rabbi Kalman said, that the Inyan of Geula is really the Teichen of Yud Alef Nissan, and it's interesting to note that the Rebbe by Yud Alef Nissan Fabrengens would always speak more nigladik. It's interesting. You see a little bit of the Rebbe's style. It's the Rebbe's birthday, and the Rebbe was very much a nigladik Fabrengen with a sugya, almost always in nigla, a siyum, very in Rambam very often. So today as well, we're going to look at a Rambam. And as you look in the description of Mashiach and the Rambam, it's also Hoige B'Torah Kedavid Aviv. One of the key descriptions of Mashiach is that he's a Torah scholar of the caliber of David HaMelech. And if you want to see what David is, you have to go earlier in the Rambam. And the Rambam in the Hakadama, so the Rambam tells us that who's David HaMelech? He's not just the king, but rather David HaMelech is actually the Nasi of the Sanhedrin. Right? He wasn't just the king. He was one of the Messiah of Torah is passed down through David HaMelech, and the Nasi sits in the seat of Moshe Rabbeinu in Sanhedrin, and so too Melech HaMashiach. So what we're looking at today is a very relevant topic, which is Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitzei. I think the way it was advertised, how Judaism. What was the
Judaism in the times of Mashiach.
Judaism in the times of Mashiach. And the reason this is very relevant to us, as we're here to Fabrein, the Rebbe's birthday, 120 years, is because it very much will reflect what Judaism is perhaps supposed to look at as today. Right? What's Judaism in the times of Mashiach mean? How is Yiddishkeit going to change? And what does it really mean? Now, is the first and foremost question, of course, is Yiddishkeit going to change? So anyone who's familiar with the Rebbe's primary Chiddush in Mashiach, and we gave a share on it 2 weeks ago, is that calling Yonah Mashiach, the whole thing of Mashiach, is that nothing is going to change. Right? In the words of the Rambam, the Machzer Beis David L'Yoshna even is make sure in the first line of Hilchos Mashiach tell us that Mashiach is here to bring us back to the things L'Yoshna, to the way they once were. This is given the alte Zeiten, Fenein Zeit. Right? On the one hand, you have that's what Mashiach is. Shleimus HaTorah B'Mitzvah, the completion of Torah Mitzvahs. But yet, on the other hand, Mashiach, everyone's familiar with the words Torah Chadasha Miti Teitzei, new Torah. And in fact, there's a Medrash Yalkut Shemini that ever quotes, which is Mamish, the very strong Lashonis. It says that Torah Chadasha she'asid litein al yidei Mashiach. Torah Chadasha, the Nayir Torah, at the Eibishter that Geben she'asid litein al yidei Mashiach. We had a right, which Kvayachal sounds almost like an equivalency with Moshe Rabbeinu, she'asid litein al yidei Mashiach. And then, of course, there's a more classical medrash that people are familiar with because it's found in Medrash Rabbi. The other one I just said is in Yalkut Shemini, the less known medrash. But in Medrash Rabbi, you have the lashon that Torah Shalomid Adam Beilam Hazda heavily lifnei Torah Mashiach. At the Torah that we learn in this world is hevel legabe the Torah of Mashiach. What does all of this mean? So, on the one hand, you could say, of course, there's nothing to do with halacha, nothing to do with the mitzvahs, nothing to do with practical Yiddishkeit. The tefillin is going to be the same. Everything's, the tzitzis is going to be the same. Everything, Yom Tevim, everything's going to be exactly the same. Yiddishkeit is absolute perfection. There is nothing to perfect more. When anyone spoke about making changes to Yiddishkeit, what the Rebbe would always say is that the very fact that you think, right, women want to make changes, maybe women should do this or do that, the Rebbe would say that the premise of you trying to change something is that Yiddishkeit isn't perfect. Very interesting word. So, l'chayda, you could say, what's the Inyan of Mashiach? He's going to give us a depth. Yishakeni minashikis piyu. He'll kiss us with the kisses of his mouth, as Rashi explains that it means the deepest secrets of the Torah the Eibishter is going to reveal through Melech HaMashiach. And Mashiach is going to give us such a deep depth and such a deep appreciation of what we're doing that in comparison to our understanding of Torah now, it's going to be nothing. We're going to be so deep and so profound, and it's going to be unbelievable. However, you cannot limit it to purely the depth and the understanding and the inspiration and the meaning of it all, because the actual original makar where it says Torah Chadasha Miti Teitzei, it's interesting to note that the actual original pasuk doesn't say Torah Chadasha Miti Teitzei. It actually says Torah Me'iti Teitzei. Pasuk in Yeshaya Navi, Perek Nun Alef. It says Torah Me'iti Teitzei. However, the Medrash says when Moshiach comes, Torah Me'iti Teitzei. So it says Torah Chadasha Miti Teitzei, Chidush Torah Me'iti Teitzei. Now, what's the pshat? That basically when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a tremendous gathering of the tzaddikim, a big suuda, and we're going to watch like an amphitheater. It's going to be a huge, amazing entertainment, and the entertainment is going to be a battle, a duel, a struggle between the Shar HaPar and the Levyasim. this massive legendary ox and this fish. And the way the battle is going to finally end is that the horn of the ox is going to pierce the fish and going to rip the fish, and the fish, perhaps in its dying throes, in its throes of death, is going to swipe with its fin the neck of the sharabor. It's going to kill it, and it's going to be a gewaltige suda when you get a slice of fish and when you get a piece of steak. So fragt sich a Shaila, fragt the Medrash, is this a kosher shchita? We know that you're not allowed to chef unless you have a knife which doesn't have any bumps, and we know that the fin of the fish is very bumpy. Answers the Medrash, Terech Hadasha miti teitze. What's happening from them? We see that this Indian of Terech Hadasha, Torah Hadasha she'asid liktein al-yedei Moshiach, is Pashta Indian of Halacha. It's going to be Pashta different Yiddishkeit seemingly that we're going to keep, that this is a kosher shchita. How does this align with everything we've said and everything that Rebbe teaches, that Torah is nitzchis and Torah is perfect, and the whole purpose of Mashiach is to continue teaching the same exact halacha, the same exact Yiddishkeit that we have today. Now it's interesting to note that Rambam, if you want to say, okay, it's a medrash, whatever, the Rambam seems to say a similar notion, because if you look in Hilchos Tshuva, you'll find that Rambam actually says that Mashiach is going to be a Chacham Gadol Yosem Mishleima, a wiser man than King Solomon, a Navi Gadol Karev LeMoshe Rabbeinu, a great prophet close to the Madregi of Moshe Rabbeinu, Ulefikach Yalam Mikol Am Torah. Therefore, he's going to teach everybody Torah. What do we see from there? Seemingly, including, by the way, it says Moshe Rabbeinu and the Avos and everybody. So, seemingly, the implication of the Rambam, because over there it's Hilchos Tshuva, he's not so much per se here to describe to you who Melech Mashiach is that the description that he's giving, Chacham Gadol Yosem Shleima, Navi Gadol Karev LeMoshe Rabbeinu, Lefikach Yalam Mikol Am Torah, is that Rambam is actually referencing this concept that Mashiach is going to receive. He's going to be a tremendous prophet, Mamish Karev LeMoshe Rabbeinu, and he's going to teach everybody the teachings that he learns. And the question is, so first of all, how can halacha change? And even the part that we spoke about, the inspiration and the depth and the Kabbalah and the mysticism and the Primis HaTorah that's going to be in his Gala, also, that's not the Gedder of Torah. Torah is anything which can be extrapolated. If it can't be extrapolated from the Torah that was given to us, it's not working?
No, we don't understand.
Extrapolated?
Yeah.
The Rebbe has a letter about the age of the world, and over there he uses the word extrapolation and interpolation. So most people know from that letter the distinction between the two.
What does it say in Hebrew, the word?
And over there, the Rebbe says that if I know...
So ist dem Rostaprat, muss na Marus lernen auf aggressive klar.
Right. So extrapolate means that to learn something from one subject to another subject. If I know how this reacts from 1 degree to 100 degrees, I could take a good guess how it's going to act at 105 degrees. Because I see how it changes. How did we get to extrapolation?
You used the wrong word.
Very good. Torah has to exist from the Torah that was given to us. So much so that Rebbe says the Rebbe says that even the whole Chassidus in Kabbalah, the Rebbe brings when he gets a kodesh to the Alter Rebbe that it's all taken from Agadah, from Ein Yaakov. It's not in Nishkei Chedushim. Everything we have is taken from Torah which was given to us. The Ein Yaakov is considered a chelik of Torah Shabbat given to Klal Yisrael. We're learning it from the Klalim, continuing the Kol Torah. But anything you're teaching B'ter Nevuah, that he's learning it as a Navi, he's giving messages from God, seemingly it wouldn't fit what we're describing to be the very essence of Mashiach, which is Torah. So the answer is, where do you find this notion that Torah is going to change, or that there's going to be a difference in the Yiddishkeit that we've had in the past to the Yiddishkeit of the future? There's one thing you find in the Rambam. When the Rambam wants to describe to you how the rayas that the Mashiach is going to come, his third raya is that there's going to be a new mitzvah that we never had before. Right? The 3 Arei Miklat, we have 6 now, and we're going to have another 3, so it's going to be 9 altogether. And even though the Rambam's whole description in Hilchos Malachim is how Hatayra Azul Medis La'elam Lol Me'elam, and Ein Be'loi Shinui La'Girem Le'Tesefes, the Torah will have no change whatsoever. It's going to stand forever and for all eternity. And that is the very essence of what Torah is. As we discussed in last year, that it goes into the very essence of what Yiddishkeit is, that what really is Torah. Torah is not here to benefit the world. Torah precedes the world, and it's higher than the world. The whole world was given as a method to implement the Torah, but the Torah is Chachmasei, the Tzedek Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu, Chachmasei Ha'atzmi, the Tzedek Ha'atzmi. It's how Hashem thinks. It's what Hashem wants, regardless of the existence of the world. So if that's the very description of Mashiach, it's a little bit surprising and interesting that the Rambam's ayah for Mashiach is a mitzvah that we never had before. It's a new zah.
It's a mitzvah in the Torah. It just wasn't the Torah legislature.
Right.
Torah warned us that there isn't this mitzvah.
Right, but at the end of the day, it's one mitzvah missing, right? Not even a full mitzvah, half a mitzvah. So we're not diminishing from the importance of it. But should that be the essence of Mashiach, that we're going to have something new that we didn't have till now? Right? Does that have more importance than tefillin? No, it's just as important, no doubt about it. But it's interesting. It's not we're not asking a kasha now, but it's interesting that the Rambam's whole oifen, his whole way of describing Mashiach is you should know we're going to have a new chiddush. Yiddishkeit is not going to be exactly the same because we're going to get something new that we didn't have before. Why is that?
Also, if there's a big piece, what do we need on a big piece?
Oh, you're asking a much deeper question. Punkt. What is the raya for Mashiach that we're going to need not only 6 Arei Miklot, 6 cities of refuge for someone who kills someone b'shaygig, we're going to need 9 Arei Miklot. So mamish, there's retzach, there's murder happening everywhere. Gewaldige question. And then all of a sudden we need another 3 Arei Miklot. What's happening here? Very good. So actually the Rambam here is describing to us the gedder of all the changes that are going to happen when Mashiach comes. That they're not really in the gedder, they're not really a change to Yiddishkeit, they're actually bringing a shleimus, a whole new level into Yiddishkeit. And just as that, so to all the other changes. And the answer, B'Ktsara, the answer in its essence, what the Rebbe says, is that really everything is found in the Torah already. Nothing is not found in the Torah. It's an amazing word from the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov says, Torah's Hashem Tamima. Translation. Torah of Hashem is perfect. Right? Torah Hashem is complete. Says the Halakha of Baal Shem Tov, Torah's Hashem Tamima. Torah of Hashem is untouched. It's whole. He says, Ki'ilu, no one ever studied Torah in the entire world. It's as if the Torah exists in the world and no one even made a scratch in the Torah. You buy a Lexus, it's brand new, it's perfect condition, not one scratch, not one dent has been made. Torah's Hashem Tamima. The Torah's Hashem is absolutely complete. No one has even begun to understand one pasuk in the entire Torah. Nothing has been studied from the Torah. Mighty the Gemara from the Baal Shem Tov. Right now, the Pashas, the Baal Shem Tov's word is that Torah is the Chachmasei Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. Hashem's wisdom. Hashem is infinite. Right, and Hashem is putting it in these words. But what does that mean? These 304,805 letters. But what does it mean? That means that every pasuk within itself has infinite levels of interpretation because it's infinite. It carries within it the entire ad infinitum, the entire infinity of Hashem's wisdom. So even though it's being described in these letters and these words, that every pasuk contains within it infinite levels of interpretation because we're talking about Hashem's wisdom, which is infinite, and therefore no matter what you do, you're not making a scratch. Says the Rebbe, Torah, it's true, there are things that we are not capable of extrapolating. Simply not capable. Hashem knows that it's written in the Torah. He knows how to extrapolate it, but we're simply not capable of revealing it. The reason why it's relevant for Mashiach to be smarter than Shlomo HaMelech is that it says in Chassidus that Shlomo HaMelech said 3,000 mashalim. What does it mean? What does it explain? That he had to bring it down 3,000 levels. When he taught an Inyan in Torah, he had to bring it down 3,000 levels. So the way we bring down someone to somebody else, we have to give a mashal, whatever it may be. So he had to do that. But then from that level, they had to bring it down another level, and another level, and another level. A mashal for the mashal. And he kept going. 3,000 madregas, 3,000 levels, until finally you understand the word of Art Vaserzak. You understand what in the world he's talking about. Right? That's the thing of Shlomo HaMelech. If Mashiach is going to give us a new Torah, what does that mean? That means he's going to extrapolate something from the Torah He's going to reveal something from the Torah that we never were able to understand before. What does that mean? That he has to be smarter than King Solomon. King Solomon, right? Shlomo Melech, which I believe also was from the Arboim, the Messiah of Torah, also was a Nazi, if I remember correctly. Shlomo Beis Din, right? Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. Who was that? I think maybe not, actually. I don't know. In any event, Shlomo Melech taught the Torah. Uvemele, Moshiach is going to extrapolate from the Torah something which boggles our imagination right now. We cannot understand how you're able to extrapolate a certain din in the Torah from what we have now. The Klolim wouldn't bring us to the point because we don't understand it well enough. And some of those inyanim even have to come from the Eibishter Alein. Torah, right? Torah me'iti teitze, Torah chadosha me'iti teitze. At the Eibishter, it has to come forth from the Eibishter. But what is the Eibishter doing? Teitze, says the Rebbe. It's going out. It's not Tchidasein. He's not giving the Torah. He's going out from the Torah that we have already. It's coming forth. It's being revealed. Something which is already given, it's technically already found in all of the principles of the Torah, in the Torah Shebachsav, Torah Shebal Peh, it's already contained. However, it's such a high level that it's impossible for anyone, it's Helam She'enev B'Mitzias, and therefore it's considered Torah Chadasha, She'asa Litin Adei Mashiach, a Torah that we totally cannot even begin to fathom nowadays. So much so that the Shechita of the Levyasan to the Shur Habar is actually a kosher shchita. In that scenario, the shchita is kosher. Based on the halachas and Masechta Chulin, we're familiar with all the klolim of Torah. We know that it's not. No one explained it to us yet. It wasn't explained to us. You can't say the way the classic Mefarshim, the ones who just like explaining things away, that the reason it's going to be kosher is Hirasha. Hirasha means that if a Navi comes and tells us to transgress the Torah, we listen to the Navi. If he tells us to break Shabbos, we listen to the Navi. So he's going to tell us to eat the food, delicious. It's not kosher, but eat it anyways. The Rebbe says, why is that not? Because that's not a Chiddush Torah. That's a Din Torah nowadays, like you were saying. It's from the laws we have in front of us. It's part of the legislation. If the Navi tells you, you do it. So that's not a Chiddush Torah. We're talking about a legitimate and true Chiddush Torah, Torah Chadasha miti teitze. In the words of the Medrash, Torah Chadasha she'asa litin adei Mashiach. However, we can't understand even how you're going to arrive at such a conclusion. How we're going to be able to, our minds, right? You're going to be able to explain it to us. And it's going to need to be someone smarter than Shlomo Melech, who figured out a Torah that Shlomo Melech himself didn't figure out. And he's going to bring it down, all those levels down to us, until it makes sense in our seichel. It's going to go out, meaning it's going to come down in seichel Adam, and it's going to make sense according to us. And the Sanhedrin, Amudi Hayra, is going to vote on it, and they're going to understand it, and they're going to vote, and the halach is actually going to be that it's going to be kosher. Now, if we want to actually describe how Yiddishkeit is going to look, how? Fine, we have this one halacha. What does it mean? So it's very interesting. The Rebbe invokes from a bunch of sources in Kabbalah, from the Mikdash Melech, from the Medrash Shmuel, and from other sources, Kabbalistic sources, that the halacha is going to be like Beis Shammai when Moshiach comes. You may have heard of such a concept, which is fascinating. And we need to think about this for a moment, because technically, it's very surprising. First of all of a sudden going to be Grace Machmidim, right? Beis Shammai. Every machlokes, every bacher in yeshiva knows. You learn the Gemara, you learn the Shtayis. Beis Shammai is machmer. Seemingly, one would think, as Mashiach comes, verkehrt. We don't need so many chumras anymore, because there's so much positivity and so much light and so much happiness and so much joy that we don't need the restrictions. Seemingly, the chumras are there because you're going to fall into negativity, but seemingly we don't need those chumras as much. So all of a sudden, the halakha is going to be like Beis Shammai, pili plum. Right? What does it mean? So a question was asked before: why do we need Adi Miklat? Why do we need cities of refuge when Mashiach comes? And it's 9 now. So really, the word's like this. Actually, it's a very klolistic mitzvah. It's a very general mitzvah, the mitzvah of Adi Miklat, of cities of refuge. Why is it such a klolistic mitzvah? Because it says in the Medrash that Adam Arishan was expelled from Gan Eden because he brought death to the world, and he went into Golus. Just like if you kill someone, you go into Golus. So actually, the tikkun haklali, the tikkun of the most general sin that ever happened, is actually the idea of Adi Miklat. And every Aveda that we do, really what it is, more than anything, is loss of potential. Really, we think of a sin where we think we did something negative here. It's true, but the real sin is that we took energy which could have been utilized to such beautiful ends, and we wasted it. We wasted it. It's a taste of death. It's a form of death that we took blood from, right? Blood. We did a transfusion, and the Shefich Dam Ha'adam Ba'adam. We took blood away from Kedusha. And we gave it away to the Adam of Klippa. Why is a woman nida when she sees blood? Because there was a potential for life, and which wasn't actualized, so it's a whiff of death. So when she sees blood, she's tameh. So Ari Miklat is actually Divrei Teira Koltin. It's actually the protection where we remove ourselves from, or we're protecting ourselves, and we're entering into this relationship with Hashem. And what it represents, the extra 3 Ari Miklat is that the religiosity and the Chassidischkeit and the Yiddishkeit and the halacha does not have to be a contradiction, does not have to be something which has to do with, there's so much negativity which I need to run away from. It doesn't have to be a negative part of our lives. On the contrary, the fact that we have more Ari Mikla than now means that we're more disconnected from anything negative. In other words, there's no room. We're opening up 3 new cities. Why are we opening up 3 new cities? That to not even allow for the possibility of something negative happening. We're much more removed from the possibility of something happening. The truth be told, that the concept of the halacha being like Beis Shammai, what it actually represents is that so on the Pashta level, the Gemara says that for 3 years there was a machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Beis Hillel says halacha k'meisenu. Beis Shammai said halacha k'meisenu. 3 years they're fighting. What happened in the end? Anybody know? What an Alef in Daf Gimel, famous Gemara.
Is that everything sticking with sword in the ground?
No, that's Shabbos Daf Yudches. It's a difficult one. Baskel. That's a Baskel. Baskel came out and said, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim v'halacha k'beis Hillel. I always love that line. Yeah, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim v'halacha k'beis Hillel. Right, fine. So now what's this b'chal given the suffix, and why was there a Baskel? The truth is, Taisus is mazver that the truth is Beis Hillel had the majority. However, there was a shaila: do we follow the majority because Beis Shammai was smarter? Mechaded de tfei. And when you're smarter, perhaps you could say that you can't take into account the majority because they're stupider. Take the stupid masses and bring them into the vote. Therefore, it's given a shaila b'mitzias. You can't listen to a Baskel to go against Kali Torah, to change the rules of Torah, to decide who to pass in like. But being that the rule of Torah is after Ram Mahatis is always to follow the majority, Nerva, then there was a shaila that made the Beis Shammai mechaded tfei. Therefore, Baskel came out and was megala to us that the halacha ki Beis Hillel. But ultimately, like we said before, in the times of Moshiach, what's going to be? The Yidden are going to be chachamim gedolim, the Yedim dvarim astumim. The all Yidden are going to be mechaded tfei. They're going to be very highly intelligent, and therefore we're going to understand like Beis Shammai. And ultimately, the halacha is going to end up like Beis Shammai, pashtus. By the way, this is the kudah that has to be understood in our seichel is mefurish that I'm also. He says kifi koyach ha'adam. He's very medayek. Kifi koyach ha'adam. That has to be rational and has to be explainable in our minds. But what does it really mean? This concept in avodah. What does it mean? The Beis Shammai mechad and tfei, and that we're going to be on the level of Beis Shammai, and therefore we're going to be more machmir. What it means is like this. Is that you can live your life, you can have a more superficial relationship, and then you can have a deeper relationship. When you have a deeper relationship, then even things which are more subtle, and you could say, this not a big deal. The more higher you have a relationship with God, then the more subtle things are going to, you're not even going to want to have anything which would even have the possibility of bringing you to anything which could come near to something which could separate you from the object of your love, right? And so this is really where it comes from, that there's this solidity, out of the wrong word, there's a subtleness to Beis Shammai, that he has a depth of relationship, which for him, there's even things which don't do anything. So everyone agrees that certain things have to be rejected. Smell deicha. Everyone agrees that there are dvarim mutarim that have to be embraced, but then there are things which it's questionable. Could it bring me down or could it not bring me down? So Beis Shammai always sees the potential, and he says it's possible that there's something wrong with it. Beis Hillel says no. I have what's in front of me. So, but the question is, when we get deeper, when we get like Beis Shammai, is that a chisaron or is that a maila? So nowadays, if you follow Beis Shammai, it's actually a chisaron. The Rebbe brings from the Gemara in Shabbos that someone mentioned about the sword that it's it's like the yom asu Yisrael as egel. It was so bad, the 18 things we passed in like Beis Shammai, it was like the day the egel hazov happened. Right nowadays, why? Because nowadays, when a Jew is living in that space where everything needs to be rejected, and that means that he's rejecting huge parts of his own identity, and he's rejecting huge parts of the world, and he didn't find a way to bring the world to make the world a din of tachtonim. He didn't find a way to make this world a dwelling place for God. He didn't find a way to bring together. He has to reject. He's rejecting Olam Hazeh, but not because he's on the level where he's so connected and he's so inspired and he's so deep that anything which has the most subtle disconnection from Hashem that needs to be rejected. No, he's not on that level. We're not on the level of Beis Shammai, and for us, and nevertheless, he's rejecting elements of Olam Hazeh. So just to take a practical example, we know that the Alter Rebbe, and we'll conclude in 2-3 minutes. I don't want to hog the show.
Yeah, let's wait another 5 minutes with the.
I didn't mean that, but yeah, I'm saying that.
Yes, Seligson tells me
yeah.
Let's wait 5 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So the Alter Rebbe, we know when he was being arrested at this Kislev, so Shmuel Munkus went to him. I was in the middle of the night, and he was hiding from the government. Or should he give himself in? Chavi ma'at, the Gemara says. And he knocked on the door, and he says, in Mitternacht, it was 2 a.m. So he told him, "Ich hab nicht gewusst, as beim Rebbe is for a Nacht. I didn't know by the Rebbe there's such a thing as night." So he says, "Was willst du?" Sakona. Anyways, he asked Shmuel Munkus, should he give himself in? So Shmuel Munkus said, "I think yeah." He says, "Doch sakona, it's dangerous." The famous answer, he told him, "Oi, du bist a Rebbe, but you can kill nicht nehmen. If you're a Rebbe, no bullet's going to take you. But then shot. If you're not a Rebbe, then you deserve it. Why?" What's the other nuscha? No, that's the end of the line. So it's the Veret Farvas, because Veret gegeben the Recht, who gave you the right to take away the pleasure of Olam Hazeh from so many Yidden?
So da gibt es als die erste Chelik ist beklar nicht dort. Das Shmuel Munkus so kann man nicht dort machen, ist Wert.
Yeah.
That's
the extra sharp. Right. The Rebbe actually gives a maramakim for this in a sikha in the back of Chelik Tezvav. Look at the sikhas. There's a Gemara in Alef and Daf Samach Gimel. The Gemara says that there's a pasuk in Michoel which says, the women of my people you expel from her tanugim, from her pleasures. And he says this is someone who sleeps in the same room as a husband and wife. So you're taking away from them. And the Gemara says even if she's in nida, even if nothing's happening, especially you're mixing into their privacy, which they get pleasure from. And the Gemara and it's saying very critical things. In the She'am, he says it's a Shveda Aveda. The next pasuk is Kumu Luchu. Going to Golos. This is not the menucha that I wanted. It's a big Aveda. So the Rebbe actually in the Ha'ara there says that this is the mark of Shmuel Munkus, that he was saying that Verte gegeben the Recht that wegnehmen a Teilig von Yidden. We see in the Gemara in Eid in the Samach Gimel that the Shvera Aveda to sich hereinmischen and some a Yid hat Hanor, was mischt sich herein? Right? It's Aveda. So the Rebbe goes on to the Sikha to say, but then, what's Takel Chayda? We see in the Gemara it's a Shvera Aveda to be mamait from a Yid his pleasure.
Just because he's a Rebbe, why did he actually do it?
Why did he do it? So the Rebbe says, to bring them to godliness. And what Shmuel Munkus was telling the Alter Rebbe was that if they're not being brought to godliness, right? If the business Rebbe, if you're not being brought to godliness, right? Then what is happening? So we see. I'm just bringing that as a dogma. We see that the Rabbeim believed in us very much, And the times that we're living in, which is close to the times of Mashiach, it's a world. This is what's fascinating about Chabad for many people. It's interesting. Is on the one hand the fanaticism, on the one hand the unbendingness, the fact that it's as frum as can be. Von zweiten Seite, there's no stida to the world, to the Simchas Achayim, to the right. There's no contradiction to Elam Hazeh, and it really the question arises where it's coming from. So on the one hand, when someone asks you what's Yemei Mashiach going to be like, it's clear that it's going to be. Now, ultimately, there's a new tukuf after this, which is Tchis HaMesim, which is a whole different. They never said that then the halach is going to be like Beis Shammai and like Beis Hillel. It's a whole different sikha. But the first tukuf of Yemei Mashiach, which we're heading into and we're already beginning, is actually much frumer. However, very religious, very frum, very chassidish. Right? No compromise. On the contrary, not even allowing there to be a svara. Right? I just saw that Rebbe said that every kid's room should have a siddur, a chumash, and a Haggadah Shel Pesach. And the Rebbe later on said, and maybe also a Tehillim. So over there, the Rebbe said that the kid should know that in his room you only eat kosher, and on the table are only Sifrei Kodesh. They only have Jewish books. It's very interesting. It seems to be hate off from the Rebbe, not have other books. But so on the one hand, you have the emes chassidish chinuch with no compromise, where it's fakert halacha k'Beis Shammai. However, it's not with the whole negative thing. The Gemara says it's very negative. The Gemara in Edom we just quoted, right? That because, on the contrary, because it's coming from such a positive place, it does nothing but enhance and bring out the greatest and depth in the relationship with Hashem. There's halcha b'rechava, the Rebbe's derech, the breitkeit shein kamoyu. We're going to be in Kodesh, the entire world, and the Rebbe's 120th birthday, which can go straight into the Geula with all the hisrachvos and the greatness, and our own personal lives. Everyone should have the Geula pratis. And I think the hira for working people and for any people is that don't hesitate, don't feel that there's a psak, that it's not my level to become more frum, right? Fakert, that you should know that you're living in the times of Mashiach, and there's a way and it will be moisef and simchas achayim. It's going to give you more joy, and it's going to come from a joyous place where you feel more connected with the Likus, and you can see it with this perspective of Mashiach, that you don't want anything to possibly even have the possibility of getting in the way between you and Hashem. So when Mashiach comes, we have an extra 3 Ari Mikvah to dispel even the notion of something bad happening in our lives.
Yeah. wir können machen Michoel. Ay 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 Rabbi say, I prepare tables. Yeah, me hat, ich rede hier. Kannst gar nicht bei mir sagen, aber I prepare tables for matcha bigger oilom, it's not what of Yiddish, was kleiner is the oilom, is grosser the simcha. Why? If the crowd is smaller, the simcha is bigger. Why? Not because Baruch Hashem it's a small crowd. It's because every person in the Fabringen can take Beruchnias, also Gashmias, but can take Beruchnias as much as a few people can take always. There's space so much to take because the Mashpim are more great, the Divrei Chizuk, and the Maises, and the Mshir, and the other stuff. So we have to say L'chaim. L'chaim, I'm not saying we should say 3 times 4 Kelly over Midaf Fabringen. And everyone is talking about Meo Ve'etzim Sholom. I don't remember even one occasion that the Rebbe was celebrating, is celebrating, if it's a Yom Huledes of the Rebbe, if it's a Yom Huledes of any of the Rabbi, if it's a Yom HaIlul, if it's a Yom HaGeula of the Frierdiker Rebbe, of the Michoel Rebbe, of the Alter Rebbe, or any occasion, Hasidic, that the Rebbe spoke about the Inyan, without a Inyan of Meisel Bepoel, without a Inyan of was kommt heraus von dem, der Bechem. So, when we verbring a few days before Pesach, before Alef Nissan, we have to know that the Fabringen has to make everyone, each one of us, to go home with something. Doesn't matter what. Epes Ha'inyan that will push us closer to the Rebbe, closer to Inyonim of the Rebbe. These are Mispalel here in Shul. I'm not going to mention the name even if it's not Loshinor, it's a Loshin Toivo. But he came Sunday to Shul. And he's traveling every week from Sunday night to Friday morning. Sometimes he comes Thursday night home, sometimes he goes Monday morning only to work. But he travels every week to another city. This is his business. He's traveling. So he comes Sunday to Shul and he said, in a few hours I'm traveling to, I think he said Texas. For what? He goes to see a few sochrim for the business that he's busy with. So I said to him, and how many sets of matzah shmura you are taking with you? He says, I have a little suitcase and I didn't think about it. So I didn't give him musa, how can you not think about it in Yarach Chosif? Just schlepped them to the office of the OK that we have sets that we're giving out. And I gave him sets. I told him now, maybe you will have to pay another $100 for a suitcase, but you're going to be, the whole week, beside the business, you're going to be a shliach of the Rebbe. Every day of this week, I was receiving a picture from him and another customer, and another dost that is giving matzahs. And then because that will happen to film already and other stuff. I did have listened that you spoke about mentions that are walking, like Poyalim, the Gashmias. But the Rebbe made all of us shluchim. The reason to Fabring a few days before Alef Nissan, it's because we should go and we should get to Alef Nissan another, go another, a different person. yes, we have our personality. And I said already a story. I will say it again in very short. Another disciple of the shul. I will say the name because he said the story already a few times. Ingi from Atzoler. He has a business also that he's building in Manhattan also, the urgent care. He has on the Upper West Side, the Upper East Side. He has already 8 locations today. A few in the city, a few in Florida, a few in Brooklyn. So I'm giving a shir every Wednesday night in Crown Heights to Balabatim, guys that are working very hard, and we are learning a sikh of the Rebbe in a way that everyone can take home a sikh in his brain, in his heart, and he can share with his customers, his partners, and he has something to say the Friday night meal. So, and we verbringt a little bit, a half an hour later, if it's we have a department, we will see a few hours. And then I have also a verbringen and a shir, sometime but not every week, in Williamsburg, from Ungarischen guys, like Satmar, it's a combination of Satmar puppets. So this story happened in the last summer, and it's continuing until now, the story. So I got a phone call from a guy in Williamsburg, and he says, Reb Kamen, like a week and a half before Shavuos, we would like to have a verbringen, not a shir this time. We want to go into Shavuos in the glasses of Chassidus Chabad. So can you come and verbring with us, but not a shir? So I said, of course. And they made up a night in the apartment of one of the Chaverim. It's businessmen, like people in business, real estate guys, electricity, other stuff, construction. So if they said that they don't want to have a shir, doesn't mean that I don't have to make copies of a maimer. So I prepared a maimer, it's a maimer that the Rebbe is talking about the Chofs, but the Rebbe is talking about Anoichi, Klal Uprat, Ganz Teres, Klal Uprat, Asor Marois, Klal Uprat, Avodas Hashem, Klal Uprat, Nishmat Maimer. So I came and I said, listen, I am not ready to verbring. To verbring, I need a half an hour, 45 minutes to learn something quick with you, and then we will go into the minor to verbring. So we did it. 8:30 we started the field, just for 45 minutes we was learning together, and then we started to verbring until like 4:45 in the morning. And I left the car there, and they took me, and because I couldn't drive, I was a little bit tired, and maybe a little bit whatever. And before the end of the verbringing, like a half an hour, 5:30, 5:15, something like that, I said to them, every Fabringer needs a bechein. Right? We say so many times, Barosh Batuda, ubechein, has to do something, bechein. So they said to me, if you want to be any bechein, you spoke all night, Chassidish and Maises, Chassidus and other stuff. Tell us what is the bechein we should take from this Fabringer. I said the story already a few times, but I said, I will say it because you're going to take it with you. So I said to them, you are Satmar guys. Hope Satmar, it's the same thing with another decoration. So I'm not going to tell you, go to Manhattan, or go to Ben Yehuda in Eretz Yisrael, or whatever, and ask people around, are you Jewish by any chance? And do tefillin with them. Well, your Rebbe is not telling you to do it. Maybe he's telling you not to do it. Okay? But this is something that you can do, and it's not against your minhag, your noihag. You have offices. You meet every week people. Some of them not Jewish, some of them lehavdil Jewish. Some of the Jewish people are Shem Retorah mitzvahs, but some not. So what will happen if you will have a pair of, like we call it, mivtzoim tefillin, buy something that should be kosher, melechatchile, doesn't have to be $1,000 per tefillin, but $500-600, whatever the price is, have it in your office. Someone comes to your office, have a yarmulke, and tell him, when was the last time you did tefillin in your life? And he will tell you, maybe never, maybe a year ago, maybe whatever. So tell him, would you be willing to do it with me now? You're going to have 3 things that will happen right away. Number one, you're going to make another Jew to do a mitzvah. And it's not the avera if another Yid is doing a mitzvah. I told him, not all of them are aware about. So nicht can aware if another Yid is doing a mitzvah. Number two, you're going to elevate yourself to another level. Why? Because if you are talking to your customers, partners, or whatever the case is, in a level of what you do to feeling, they are looking at you as like a rabbi, or they're not going to talk to you in a lower level of the street. Many times we speak at shul, at home, but when we go to Manhattan, we go to Haveri, we go in the business, they tell you are not such a clean joke and you have to laugh because he's doing a business with you. They will talk to you very, very nice. Only the way how you speak to someone in shul, only the way. So you're going to elevate yourself even at work to another level, to another shelf, higher. Number three, you will have more people doing business with you. People like to do business with someone that is not embarrassed with his emunah. He's like an honest person and he's telling you what he believes and what he thinks. So I didn't know if something will happen from this Fabringen or not. But a week later, I had a shear by Carol Street on the backyard. And the Fabring, after the shear, and the telephone calls. Who is on the telephone? One of the guys. And he tells me, Carmen, hast a minute? So I tell the guys, usually I'm not answering phone calls in middle of shir, but I said it's guys that we was learning together, let me see what he wants. So he said, do you remember that you spoke about the Fabringen about the film? So there was 14 guys. 2 guys got already the feeling for the offices. Said, I didn't get. No, I don't know if I'm going to do it in my office always. But he has a brother-in-law, also a Satmar guy. This brother-in-law has a first cousin that was learning in Satmar. But 7 years ago, he left. Like, we call it off the derech. He left. It's a few years already that he's in Tel Aviv doing business. For the first few years, he didn't want to have to do anything with the family. Now he's talking already, it's coming down. So he said, today, my brother-in-law's cousin called me from Tel Aviv. And he asked me a business question. So I said to myself, Reb Kamel spoke in the Fabringen about the film with freie guys. Here is someone that was learning in the same yeshiva that I was learning. Not the same class, but the same yeshiva. He's calling me about a business, he needs help with the advisor, for something. If I'm not asking him when was the last time he did the film, so who am I? So I said to him, when was the last time you did the film? He says, 7 years ago, when I left the tefillin in Best Medrash before I left. It's not like a Lubavitcher guy has Mishon that will go off the derech, he will take the tefillin with him, maybe another person will ask him for the tefillin, like Michoel. He will still do Michoel, right? So he said, if I'm sending you a pair of tefillin now, would you start doing this again? So he says, today, yes, I'm already not with the cast, with the anger and all. So he's calling me, he's sending me by the text a credit card. And I spoke to Moshe Klein, he spoke to someone in Kfar Chabad, Musicant, the guy in Kfar Chabad. And we arranged the film, he should go. I have a picture of the guy. So I was thinking, this is the end of the story. Shabbos, but the Kiddush here in the shul, we have every Shabbos a Kiddush. Right? Sometimes with tuna, sometimes without tuna. And I said the story. Amazing. From a Fabringen, was the Givon. A week later, I'm coming here to daven Kabbalah Shabbos. So Rabbi is sitting in his chair. Usually he comes before everyone because many times he has a tzolekol in the middle of the davening. So he's catching up, healing, whatever. He comes before everyone. And I'm coming to my place, and he says, Reb Kalman, I have something that you're gonna like. It's gonna make you happy. I'm coming to help to sit at his table. And he says, you remember, he said the story Shabbos by the Kiddush. I'm not such a guy that will go to ask people for tefillin. I didn't even do it as a book. But after you said what you said, we are just building now a new urgent care in the Upper West Side. One of the avenues, I don't remember which avenue. So there is an Israeli guy that is doing the electricity. So yesterday, Thursday, he came to work and I decided I'm going to do it. What the Satmar is doing, for sure I should do. So I asked the guy, when was the last time you did tefillin? He said 27 years before. Would you do it again? He said yes, but Ingi didn't have his tefillin with him. He has a Vishnitzer Chosid from Borough Park, a partner in this location, maybe other locations also, but in this location. And a little bit later, the guy came, and he came directly from Shul, from Borough Park, so he had that film with him, and he didn't want to leave it in the car, so he got it in the place where they're building. So Ingi says, can I use it? He says, yes, and he did the film with him. He said, today, Friday, in the morning when I went, he took that film with him, but on the way he said, I'm not going to be a nooch. Today, I'm not going to ask him, because sometimes when you are too much asking, he will say already, leave me alone. So he decided not to ask. So he took the tefillin and he went into the little office that he had while they're doing construction. And the guy comes to work Friday morning, and he came to my office, says Ingi, and he says, last night I told my wife what I did, and she was so happy. Today, before I left, she gave me the sandwich to go, and she says, your boss, you said he's a religious guy, and he lives in Brooklyn. Maybe he will go in the middle of the day, and you will still work another few hours, like in the afternoon. Ask them already before you start working to do the filling, maybe he will forget to ask you. So he says, can you do it with me now? And there is a continuation. Harvey has a continuation of a story with Connecticut, that after this story happened, another tefillin and another tefillin, mamish, a Baal Shem Tov story. So we see that action is what the Rebbe is teaching us to do. Yes, we bring together Mizok L'chaim, we hear a Moshiach Geula shir, we're going to hear more, and we're going to hear Michoel, Rabbi Seligson will bring with us. Will give us we should really feel what is like, what used to be Nissan by the Rebbe. But really, the purpose is to go home with something. That whatever we take from this Fabrengen should affect us, and the way to do it is by tomorrow night in the Shabbos table to Fabrengen with our family members, to talk to them about a point of the shir, to talk to them about a ma'aseh that we will hear about the Rebbe. We should live with the Rebbe, and we should decide that we are shluchim of the Rebbe every moment of our life. L'chaim.
Can I say something, sis? Can I say something?
Please.
I'm not a guy that like to forbrain or something like that, but they did have a roof day, and Rab Kamin said that from bringing each one, you should go out with something that. So this is something that not just so much for bringing, but I'm going to share with you a story. First of all, I am. When I drive, I'm very aggressive driver, and some people know me, some people don't know. Nobody starts with me when I'm on the road. And
You didn't change.
okay.
Even after the start.
The only thing that I had confidence is in our time when we took our license, so we asked the Rabbi a broche for driving. We needed a broche. And I was one of the guys that got a broche from the Rebbe for driving. We used to go Michoel. Anyway, so this happened in this month. Chodesh Oder happened to me 3 times. It never happened before. I drive in one place, and suddenly, boom, somebody went into me on one side of the car. 2 weeks later, I'm in Florida, and I'm driving on the highway. And suddenly they have like a barricade on the highway closing a line. I didn't see it, the sun of it, and smashed the window. And a police lady, she's from Kiev, but happened to be she's a Jewish lady, and she's telling me, "You are driving like what, like 60 miles an hour?" I said, "Yeah, 60 miles an hour." I was driving maybe 90 or whatever. And again, the whole car, the whole window. A week later, I'm again in an accident, and somebody really went into me very hard. And airbags went. So I said to myself, 3 times in 1 month. I never had it like this so many years. It's something has to happen. And I decided I'm going to tell to my friends that are thinking they are also good drivers like me. This little thing here, I want everyone to make a closet. This little thing here cost the 3 times. And I'm texting and everything else. All these years, I'm asking you all, it's taking only, a split of a second, but ושמרתם על נפשכם. You're not allowed to use this.
You shouldn't have it the whole day also, not just by driving.
I'm going to, if I want, if you want, I can show you the pictures, but I made a game of for this. I'm asking everyone, individual, when you drive, please don't text or look on the phone. It's very dangerous, and I'm telling you, I'm a good driver.
You're alive. The Rebbe's boch is
Ja, je laat altijd weer staan. En al je WhatsApp staan.
Rebbe's gemacht.
Okay, Rabbi Shai, Dr. Chaim, die...
אני אחר וחסד לכמה.
Kom achter. Dan weet ik wat meer aan.
Now he's going to do this.
Oh, wow.
Talking about Ari Michoel, if somebody would kill somebody.
You're talking about
Alef, now you do the
That was in New York or in Florida?
Okay.
Yes. משהו מספר.
נתתי לכם.
אני חשבתי שהגיל הזה קצת.
And this is one before this one.
No.
Okay, come in. This one before the rest.
Oh, wow.
So, it's not a joke.
Should have a smartphone.
One of the inyanim that we saw by the Rebbe over the years is that when there was a season in the year, a certain season, a certain month in the year, it wasn't still a month on the calendar, but the Rebbe Pashit, it was an experience by the Rebbe. Pashit Mitzad, the Rebbe himself, we saw the Seder was a different Seder, if it was Elul, if it was Nissan. As once somebody brought somebody once on the Kudev to the Rebbe for Tisha B'Av. The first time he introduced the person to the Rebbe was Tisha B'Av. The person comes in, he looks at the Rebbe, and after that he walks out, he says, this is not the man, I see him in the pictures. He says, it's a completely different person. But the Rebbe Tisha B'Av was Tisha B'Av, he says. The same thing's also been again to Chedesh Tishrei, which is Chedesh HaMesubah, a Chedesh that's a very satisfied Chedesh with many Yom Tov and Brachas, as the Rebbe quotes from the Medrash. Likewise, when it comes to Chedesh Nissan by the Rebbe was like a tkufa for itself. It repeated itself every year. And many different things took place, Chedesh Nissan, which also, in a sense, people were aware of because it related to them. For example, there was no Yechidus, Chedesh Nissan. Chedesh Nissan, the Rebbe did not make any Yechidus. Possibly he was already preparing for Yom Tov. Answers, responses to people's letters also slowed down because it was Pashit, there was going to the Eyal very often, every few days. I once saw somewhere, and I forgot where I saw it, but it was upstairs by the Seder, by the Zdorim, but the Rebbe would, Bichlal, eat the Yom Tov Sudas upstairs in the Friedrich Rebbe's apartment that went on for 21 years. It went on from Tafshin Yud, after the Stalkus, the Rebbe continued as before. It went on to Simchas Torah, Tafshin Lamed Alef, late 1970. All the Yom Tov Sudas the Rebbe would eat upstairs. Not Shabbos, but Yom Tov. Rosh Hashanah, Mitzvah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Sukkot was on the porch, behind, overlooking the yard. The Chotzer, and likewise Pesach, the Sudas, the Zdorim, everything was upstairs. And Shavuos, people would be invited upstairs to the Suda. They were generally invited by the Rebbetzin in Chamadina. She would invite them. She had a list. She would come out and check out who's there. First, you didn't have Chavis time to come freeloaders just to sit down by the table. Nobody felt so comfortable to sit down by the table. I feel the people that were sitting by the table also didn't feel so comfortable eating. So Maisa with one person, I think it was Chaim Gutnik, he said to the Rebbe that it's very uncomfortable to sit by the Rebbe's table, sitting right by the Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, Mezeta Megitzach. See, people manage. At the time, they manage. So basically, this was the Seder. The Rebbe Bechlal, as a host, the Rebbe was very, very sensitive to the people at the table. The Rebbe would not put down his fork till everybody finished eating. If the Rebbe saw someone was still eating, the Rebbe was like patchking with the fork, but he waited till that person should finish eating, because otherwise, once the Rebbe puts down the fork, everybody will put down the fork, and the person might still be in the middle of eating. So at one of the Sudas, the Rebbe was asked by the Rashag, why is it that he travels to the Eyal so often? So the Rebbe told the Rashag that there's a word from the Shalah. The Shalah says that HaChedesh Hazeh Lochem Rosh Chodashim Rishon Lochem Meshachotzi Hashana. That it's the beginning of the year, the months of the year. It ties to his Shalah that every day of Nissan is considered like Rosh Chodesh. That's how powerful it is. So the Rashag asks the Rebbe, if so, darf man doch fahren jeden Tag nehmen. So go to the Eyal every day, because every day is like Rosh Chodesh. So as far as I remember, what I read was that the Rebbe said, if they would have allowed me, I would have gone. Pashtus, the Rebbetzin has also something to say. It's the only one that could really say something. So basically, but the Rebbe went every few days. It was like known. Nissan, the Rebbe is by the Eyal, and he's there all day. Winter was winter, summer was summer, spring was spring. He stood under the heat, stood under the cold, till they made a booth, till they made a heater. So everything was pashut. The Rebbe stood there till the end of the day. So Kopanim, B'Chedesh Nissan, what we saw was, as mentioned, the Yechida stopped. Letters slowed down. Responses to letters. We find it also Tishrei time. We see the Rebbe writes to people after Yom Tov that didn't have a chance mitzad hameyadim, Chedesh hameyadim, to respond, to look at the letters, unless it was something urgent. So the person would call up the maskiros, and he would ask the maskiros that it's something urgent, that is mamish waiting for an answer, or memela, it would be brought to the Rebbe's attention, and the person had a better chance to get an immediate answer. Although there were times, as we heard the message of the years, Himmel Shein Yonim that were taking place, the timings of the Rebbe answering letters. I mean, the Maskiros once went in, and there was a letter that somebody asked them to look at, that the Rebbe, that he should point it out to the Rebbe. So actually, the letter was on the bottom of the whole pipe. When one of the Maskirim came in, they took, it was Mr. Rebbe, wasn't room, took the thing, and he brought it like to the Rebbe's attention to the top of the package. He looked later at it, he saw weiter that it was weiter placed under the whole pack of letters. The Rebbe once, like I said, from dann weiß man, wenn's antworten. From here we know exactly when the answers need to go out, and to whom. So basically, it's alles given Himmel Shein Yonim. So b'meila, but bichlal, this was known for Nissan, that the Rebbe positive is. I remember one time, the Rebbe came to shul, ich weiß nicht what it was, if he was working in the house or was, it was like Kriyas HaTeira, and the Rebbe's fingertips were mamish black. Positive like he was working in the house, Epis was. It was very unusual, it was the only time we ever saw that. So, b'chol eifim, by the Rebbe, the month of Nissan began actually a few days earlier. It began in later years, Chavhei Oder. That is when the Rebbe worked on the first message, the first Michtav Kloli of the Chag HaPesach. Originally, there would be a message for Rosh Hashanah, a message for Pesach, and later years, the Rebbe started to add more letters for Rosh Chodesh Nissan, Yud Alef Nissan, and then became Chavhei Oder. So actually, 3 letters, a set of 3 letters came out in the later years, according to the last years, for Chag HaPesach. The letter would be dictated to Dr. Mendel. He would come into the Rebbe a few times a week, and the Rebbe would dictate him the idea, the concept of the letter, and sometimes even more than that, and he would type up the letter. After that, he would hand it into the Rebbe. So basically, the letter would be in Yiddish, and he would then send it into the Rebbe should review it. Most of the time, there were additions, omissions, the Rebbe took out things, the Rebbe added things, the Rebbe changed words, choice of words, we're talking about in Yiddish. And I once heard Dafke from Rabbi Klein, Al Vashalim, that the Rebbe worked sometimes on a letter more than on a likud Zichas. Because with the Zichas, the Rebbe relied. The Lashon, here, the letter was measured in weight. Everything was, and the choice of words, Bechal by the Rebbe was very, very precise, and what exactly the point the Rebbe was making, and the Rebbe was mamish working on it hours. One spoke with Dr. Kranzler, he was a writer of children's books, and he would write many books for Americas, and he worked in the 1940s. I once asked him if the Rebbe had any shaykhs with the books that came out. So I think it was him or one of the artist Michoel Schwartz said that there was nothing. I think it was Gershon Kranzler. He said there was nothing b'negeh to Merkaz that the Rebbe did not put in expression what the world says. But from the Rebbe was involved in every detail, as the Rebbe was the menahel in charge of Merkaz Kahos. So b'meila everything went through Dagor. He says, in the choice of words sometimes that he used, and the Rebbe used were different. The Rebbe sometimes used a better word or a more appropriate word for that, the context of that chapter or whatever it was in the book. After the Rebbe was pleased, which could be sometimes a few times retyping. We didn't have computers then, so everything had to go through the typewriter. It had to be again typed. Couldn't just enter corrections. So sometimes it could be 2-3 times. So the Rebbe was pleased with it, and then there were Mara Mekemas. The Rebbe cited Mara Mekemas for the letter. The Mara Mekemas in the letter were basically at least, L'chol HaPoches, a reference to each one of the Rabbeim, at least once, from the Baal Shem Tov, which means that in the Michtavim Klolim, you will not see a Michtav Kloli that the Rebbe does not cite from the Baal Shem Tov to the Frierdiker Rebbe. Later years, also a Sefer from the Rebbe, a Sefer from the Rebbe's father. So this is like a Chok V'Leyaver, Chok Avur when it came to a Michtav Kloli. A person who really had more insight in what it meant for the Rebbe preparing a Michtav Kloli, da Yid soll sein gesund, his name is Rab Tuvia Bloy. He lives in Yerushalayim, and he was the one that was Zeicha, that the Rebbe chose him to translate these letters in Hebrew. So in English, Dr. Mendel translated, but as soon as it was translated, written in Yiddish and English, published already at the same time, they were dictating the letter on the phone. It was before the fax machines. They dictated the letter, and Rabbi Tivya would write it, and then he would he would translate it. And today there's 2 svarim that he published, Igris Melech, it's a set, very beautiful set, Mesuder, all the Mechtavim Klalim. In addition to that, also a whole section of Mechtavim to Neshei of Nes Yisrael, general letters, and to children, Yoladim v'Yolodis. The beginning of the Sefer has a 75-page preface on Movli, what it meant a Michtav Klali by the Rebbe. Pashit, very interesting insights. Pashit, how the Rebbe was involved in every detail, the time the Rebbe spent, the energy he invested. Al Kaponim, likewise, the next letter came out, was the same thing. Again, a letter in Yiddish, a hemshech to the earlier letter, which Bepashtas before Pesach was a Pesach, message for Pesach. And then there was a third letter, Yud Alef Nissan. And all these letters were one hemshech, they were mamish like one hemshech, a continuation. They were in Yiddish, and they were also with references from all the Rabbeim. So that's basically what we saw in these Michtavim. A Michtav Klali, when a person reads it today, if they don't know the energy that the Rebbe spent in the Chulu, they would have no idea that there's something to look. They would look at it on the surface. Finally, Lepel Mamish, a Michtav Klali needs to be learned. Rabbi Mentlik, Alef Shalom, when he was the Rosh Hashiva in 770, when he was around, he would give a Shir Klali. The Zal upstairs was packed with Bacharim. A Shir Klali in the Michtav Klali that just came out. So the Chayre was not Mashir. He would go through all the Maramakemas. He had his index cards, and he would write down what it says there, and he would possibly learn the Iyun, the Michtav Klali. He asked questions of the Rebbe, and the Rebbe answered him. Questions benegir in Maramakemas. Why is one Maramakim before the other? Mosul Gemara, after Medrash, why is it should be Fakir? The Rebbe would answer him, Biksav, and sometimes at the Fabrengen. And that really gave us an insight that a Michtav Klali from the Rebbe, Pashat Achmelerna and Be'iyur. I once heard from Rab Shalom Ber Pevzner, Alef Shalom, who was eager to publish many Svarim from the Rabbeim, that he was once approached by a Veltisha Yid who read one of the letters, the Michtavim Klalim, and he said that the Rebbe, he didn't tell me which letter it was, which Ha'ora. He says the Rebbe, with a line and a half of a Ha'ora, answered a question from Rabbi Kiva. On Blitis on Gonet. He said this person knew about the question. Dort gesehen, the Rebbe, in a glatten from just the Sora HaKushya, the Kushya goes off. Akoponim, this gives us some positive insight how the Rebbe communicated with us through the Ha'ores and the letter of the Chulum. We find it also similar to that also in the Michtav Proti, Michtav Klali Proti. By the Rebbe, there was a certain group of letters that were called Klali Proti. The Klali Proti were letters that were written to Shluchim, to a group of Shluchim, Askonim, Rabbonim, on a monthly basis. Every month they would get a letter. It's called Klali Proti because Proti, the Rebbe would sometimes individually, in particular, write on the letter, he would answer individual question to that person personally. So it was a Klali Proti. So that wrote to the Rebbe that he would like to have mamish, like a personal letter mamish. He feels like this is it's not relevant. Everybody's getting the same letter. So the Rebbe wrote him like this. That the Inyonim, about the Ha'ores, the Rebbe writes in the Michtav Klali Prati also had Ha'ores. I don't know if all the Rabbi mentioned, but there's Ha'ores there, Inyonim Fulana. So Akoponim, the Rebbe said to him, I am involved now in this topic, on this topic. I'm now involved in it. The mail I figured that you will appreciate that I'm sharing it also with you. And then the Rebbe concludes. The Rebbe says, since the case is not so, it doesn't seem so, if I'm not mistaken, ich will es nicht sagen, as it does, but it's actually also printed in the Chura, the Rebbe said, like, okay, it's like, I'm sorry for bothering you, and I'll know for weiter, Basically, the Rebbe was sharing with this chassid on a monthly basis, communicating with him, und die Krogen in Yom for Rebbe, which today, we see it in the Likutei Sichos and the Sofos. Of the Peo, Klali Prati letters, there's a Welt from them, that Shluchim got on a steady basis, month after month. There was once a couple that wrote into the Rebbe. They asked the Rebbe a certain question, and they needed an urgent answer, and it was an urgent matter that they need immediate answer, and the Rebbe's not answering once, a second time, a third time. They didn't get any answer from the Rebbe, formally. There was a family that was traveling from Eretz Yisrael here, and they asked this family that since you're going to go into the Rebbe, so ask on our behalf that this family is waiting urgently for an answer. No, they presented it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe said, Ich habe sie geantwortet 3 Mal. I answered them 3 times. In the Michoel Kloli of this date, a Michoel Kloli the next date, and the third date. And the Rebbe says, where it says B'nai, I mean the husband. B'nai Yisrael, I mean the wife. Which means to say, when it comes to Michoel Kloli, it is not a rabbi giving a sermon. The Rebbe says, Rabbonim, when they give sermons, they have to make sure not to say the same drasha from last year, because the board might not be pleased with it, and it can severe their whole position. By the Rebbe, it doesn't go like that. By the Rebbe, we find Mechtovim Klolim sometimes that he discusses the same topic again years later, because that is what was relevant, applicable to Yidden then, Klal Yisrael at that time. So from there we see Hashkafa, how the Rebbe Pashat answers a couple, although it doesn't say individually there in Yom, but the Rebbe chose this topic, which they can derive from their lesson in whatever they need, in a physical, begashmis or beruchnis. Another interesting thing, Benegia Michtav Klali, we picked up on erection in the later years. It could be, maybe it didn't happen before. The Shabbos before a Michtav Klali was released, the Rebbe would speak a sikha that was mamish the contents of that Michtav Klali. How did we see it? We saw it because it was a different signan, a different language style. It was a different style, the way he presented it. We saw that it was more like more on the surface, a lighter Indian to understand. And later, after Shabbos, we saw this was the Michtav Klali. The Rebbe would sign his name after he went to the Ale. That's when he would release the Michtav Klali. And the first place where the Michtav Klali made its way in 770 was upstairs on the door of the Zal. Once the mosquitoes put up with scotch tape the letter, 3-4 pages, Chassidim knew, the Pnimim knew, there's a Michtav Klali. And that's how, and then later it came out for Yom Tov, all in one liquid. So B'cholei, from this is basically the union of a Michtav Klali. What we take out from this is, Kalman mentioned earlier the union of Bechein. It's verstandig, the Rebbe mentions it at all times, the union of Bechein. Bechein is that we need to learn, comes now Yud Alef Nissan, Achlata, to start learning more. The Rebbe stated, connecting with the Rebbe, as we see it also in the Yom Yom, 10 days before Gimel Tammuz. 10 days before. The Rebbe quotes a letter that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote, Chav Dalet Sivan, Tov Shin Gimel, and it's a letter that happens to be Chav Dalet Sivan Tov Reish Tzadik Dalet from the Frierdiker Rebbe, on the same day. But that's not Mitzvah. It's not that the Rebbe chose because we find many Pisgam in the Yom Yom that the Rebbe chose a date which is not the date which it was originally written, that Pisgam, as part of a letter. So the Rebbe writes, quotes from the Frierdiker Rebbe, Asheya b'meis kashruse shelei elai. When a person asks, how is this kashus to me since I don't know him personally, Frierdiker Rebbe writes it. So the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, Ha'is kashus amitis hi al yidei limad ha'teira. It's through learning Teira. Learning my Maimorim, reading my Sichas, Mishtatef imanash bihisvadusam ubilimudam. He participates with Anash in their Verbringens and learning, and he is Mekayim by Bakashasi of Amiras Tilim, and Shmiras Asdorim, Hine Bazei Aiskashos. Says, with this is the Iskashos. And when we think of it a minute, we realize a pelodike Zach, that the Friedrich Rebbe begins, the true iskashis is Limud HaTeira v'chul all the Inyanim and the Takonis, and then he concludes, and with this is the iskashis. So the question is, l'cheira, every word by the Rabbeim was bediyot. He was a Inyan from saying once, the beginning what iskashis, and then saying this is the iskashis. So the word is that the Rebbe once mentions in Benegiyat Yem Yem, it says over there, V'hi Teira Sabal Shem Tev. So the Rebbe asks the question, why does it say twice V'hi? So the Rebbe says, because by Kotshim, when it comes to the Yonim of Kotshim, is shown all of HaKosef Lakiv. That it's repeated, reiterated to stress it is like this and not in a different way. Which from this we understand by the Rebbe, the union of Limud HaTeira of his Teira, Al Derech Zeh, Limud HaTeira was his learning. The Rebbe was once asked by a Chassid, how could he be Mekusha to the Rebbe? So the Rebbe said, you learn what I learn. So there are different levels of people ask this question, and different levels got different answers. One person, the Rebbe told him Chitas. Another person, the Rebbe says, when I walk in the street, I Chazer Tanya. When you Chazer Tanya, we'll meet. A third person, a Shliach, asked the Rebbe, Nigir, what the Rebbe says, Nigla Chassidus. I'll do Nigla Chassidus, you'll Nigla Chassidus mit sich treffen. So basically, it's all through the union of Limud HaTeira. That's basically in the Talkenkunst, and the Rebbe wants was me soll lernen. The Rebbe wants me soll sich kochen lernen. A person, when after a Fabringen, the Rebbe would ask, how you tochen? That people didn't ask a question when he said something which is exactly the opposite what it says in Svarim, it says in Gemara, v'chula. And there were times that the Rebbe said, that the Alter Rebbe writes in Hilchas Talmud Torah, that sometimes a person should test his Talmidim by saying something which is the opposite and see if they're really listening. The Rebbe says, my mazel is that nobody had a comment, although I said something which is punkt verkehrt that it says in it. Aber keiner hat nichts gesagt, gar nicht. B'chol Eifem, the geschmack that the Rebbe had when people asked questions, and the Rebbe answered them. If it was negir to the public, he answered in public. If not, he answered in writing. And he answered it in the Shabbosim Fabrengen, behemshech to a Fabrengen, which was a siyum, oder andere Inyanim. Sie gewinnt a spezieller Inyan. By the Rebbe, his whole Inyan, the Rebbe said, his whole Inyan is, that's my
Arav Gadi, please, come to her.
That he basically, his Inyan was basically the Inyan of Limud HaTeira, the ganze Geschmack, the Inyan of Limud HaTeira. The Rebbe once came from his house, he walked into the Zal upstairs and he's looking. Rabbi Jacobson, Olav Hasholim, sees the Rebbe is looking for something. He asked the Rebbe, was sucht er? So the Rebbe said, ich such dem Keil HaTeira. I'm looking for the Keil HaTeira, the Bochum is 70 upstairs, the Keil HaTeira, the Geschmack in Teira, the Koch, the Leben. This is basically what the Rebbe is. So especially when it comes now, 120 years, somebody quoted from the Chassam Sefer. Geschmack, I don't know where it says exactly, you can say Parsha Vayelach, by Meir Vesem Shana Nechi, that the Meir Vesem is a Shleimus, and by Meir it's understood that this was a very big simcha by Moshe Rabbeinu. Reaching, he says, 120, but this is all you yom of Meir Vesem Shana. So Al-Kopanim, by Chassidim, although Chassidim sagen B'chala, mit Achnos Shekum Mekesa, but the Pil Mamish, the Rebbe always stressed, as a Geschmack here, when we find it also a reference somewhere. So B'cholei from the Savort that somebody quoted, Shluchim amongst each other, Benegir this Chassam Sefer. B'cholei from Vinishvi, das ist Yem HaLedes von unser Rebbe, and by Yem HaLedes the Rebbe took us all in, as he takes in B'chal Nodin Yonim. And it's interesting to note, there was the first years, B'shas, it was Tafshin Zayin, when the Rebbe was in Paris for his mother, to greet his mother, take care of the papers, and return with her to the United States. So the Rebbe Tzachana said then, Heim Banacht is mein Sohn Yem HaLedes. My son's Yem HaLedes. Ebe wird beten, wird mit euch verbringen. If you'll ask him, request from him, he'll verbring with you. It didn't take much. The Chavre went to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe verbringt. Sadly, or the Chvoni sagen weniger wie das, the Chavre didn't have too much common sense, and what we have from that verbringen is only 2 paragraphs. The Rebbe speaks about the Makar of Yem HaLedes, B'choleifen Sashod. Aber Vinishvi, it was Inyan Prati, and it's interesting. 3 years later, Rav Shmuel Levitin meets the Rebbe, Beis Nissan, and he asked the Rebbe if he's going to the Eil Beis Nissan. So the Rebbe said no. Ich darf fahren in 10 Tag. In 10 days I have to go. So he asked the Rebbe, was ist 10 Tag? The Rebbe says, Inyan Prati. Inyan Prati. You'd all listen to Inyan Prati. So this was in Tafshin Yud. Tafshin Yud Alef, Chassidim already figured out, Yima led this from the Rebbe, and Tafshin Yud Beis, when the Rebbe became 50, the Rebbe selected a group. The Rebbe did not verbring Barabim either yet. He selected a group of Jungalite and Bocharim, called them to his room, and said a mimer for them. Adnes was a tiftach. Came 60, that is when the Rebbe already made a verbringen, open for all, with two Maimorim, with a Siyum, Masechta Pesachim, Sigangan, Yerushalayim Lang. But interesting to note that after the Rebbe became accepted in the Siyus, so Yud Alef Nissan by the Rebbe was commemorated, although not on that day, but Acharon Shal Pesach, in the Maimer, the Rebbe would include a biur and a posik of his new capital. And that's how we knew there's a new year. I mean, we already knew before, but we saw how the Rebbe, year after year, would include it. Sometimes he was in a Yud Gimel Nisan Maimer, but it was mamish like in those days, the Rebbe included, later years was Yud Alef Nisan. Since it became 69, the Rebbe verbringt every year. And Taka, the first year was a big surprise. I remember personally, 770 then, Tafshin Lamed Alef, so I said from 51 year, the Shluchim, the second group of Shluchim came back from Australia. And with Amol we hear, out of the blue, es geht bald sein a Verbringen. Es will be a Verbringen. Chal the Rebbe's notices a Verbringen, es geht wie a Broche Latzma. Chal the Rebbe will notify if a Verbringen. Chal, Verbringens after the Eyal, were Verbringens which were sudden short notice, and b'meile it wasn't Bechlal, if a person wasn't in 770, it's far foul. There were no beepers, there was no cell phones, there was no Shabbos alarm, garden. Afile in Acholim, Shachom Alacherim, it didn't exist. If a person wasn't there, and somebody had reingegeben Epsadas in a guide that he should walk over to the public phone, right in the 770 by the state Traceman. The last few years I didn't even check. And the B'meila, they would stand on line and would make chain calls. Call up to us, and I'm running back in. The Rebbe's coming in 5 minutes. Because the notice that the Rebbe gave was right after Mincha. The Rebbe gave notice, there will be a Verbringen. He told Rabbi Chodikov to come in. A half a minute later, it became such a kvius that whenever Rabbi Chodikov went in, Bochalim knew there's a Verbringen. So as soon as the Rebbe asked Rabbi Chodikov to come in, the Rebbe already out the door calling people. There's one time.
Ja, aber Epscher soll sagen, an Dinge soll da umkehrt zu Ramschen sein.
You can't diction up the menu. Upon him, the Rebbe would verbring them. It would be, the Rebbe would say it's a short verbringen. Sometimes it was a little longer. At Megereta, Zeir Anpin from Atzilus is also a little kleiner. Upon him, it was basically a verbringen that the Rebbe verbring in the Heroes, and that took place in the Kufa of the 1970s. The Rebbe would verbring quite after the Eil. So Yud Alef Nisan Lamed Alef was the same thing. The Rebbe then said the Maimer, which is known today very well, B'yir Mashtayosa, and there was a very small Eilam. Nobody expected a verbring, and everybody went home because the Rebbe stopped eating upstairs, so there was no verbring in the second night Pesach. So B'meila, everybody went home zum Schwer, to the Schwieger, Michoel Hashem, Shekorolem, and das ist das. So B'meila, they didn't really stay. It was a small Eilam. The Rebbe verbringt, he thanked everybody for the brachas, said a maimer, said tzichas. Heard later that after the tape recorder even broke, it was one tape recorder, echt zerbrochen, and Rabbi wrote up the maimer, to read Smuga. Akopanim, the Rebbe says, help uns, als ein Chadash, Ameinu Kikedem. L'chaim, l'chaim.
Das ist da. Nicht auf Klolik Brot. Wenn ich bin geboren, ich war Tate Bakumel, ich war zugelegt. Mach es schon, du lernst am Ende. Und das ist am Mittag. Okay, Klolik.
Between Chav Beis and Lamed
between Chav Beis and Chav Beis, in the Maimer, Pesach, and Chav Beis and Lamed Alef, in the Maimer. No Yud Alef.
Michoel וילך תופשים בן. 110 שנה.
Was? Label all time it was. Es ist geschickt, ich war da Fotzes, aber danach hat es weggenommen, Hirschel Naki, die Marmekemes. Label it again, Hirschel Naki.
What's in Marmekemes?
The Marmekemes. That's all the Marmekemes. There were standards. Some were understand with Madam McCamus, but no, I don't think they got to come there with the Mindel. Das geschieht. Der Madam McCamus hat mich erst kann sein verloren die Mann nach Französisch. I'm not going to label, später dass ich gerne zu Noti, because they're going
Before Rabbi Seligson is continuing to bring, you have to remember one thing. Rabbi Krasiansky is from Manhattan. He's out of timer. He's not out of towner. And kommt special, jeder da nicht über Nacht. Und before Rabbi Seligson agreed last minute when we asked him to verbring, you don't have many mashpim that will say, hey, okay, fine, I'm coming. And not only that, he was asking people, das ist einfach sich Shahid. And so, I'm going to ask Michoel, but I have Soke was mitmachen, aber I would like to hear a Mendel, because usually you're giving shiurim here. And tonight, the shiur was in a frame of Verbringen. Tell us a little bit about the Azebistig gekommen in Lubavitch. Nein, ich will zu sagen...
Ich hoffe, zu kommen in Lubavitch.
Nein, I mean, you are in Shliches. I know a little bit about your Shliches. I had a brother by the Koilel where your father is Chazdan.
Chazdan, yeah.
I verbring once in the Koilel by you. I gave a shir in the Koilel there of Yuchas Mechiras Chometz. And it's all Shliches there. So tell us a little bit about what it means to be a Shlich of the Rebbe. Not far away from here. Some of us are walking there almost every day, but you are there as a Shliach of the Rebbe. Zog us, share with us, please. But whatever you want to tell us, you can tell other things also.
First, I want to comment about something Rabbi Seligson said, but I'm not a shliach yet as an individual. I grew up on shlichus, of course. I got married a few months ago, but the Rebbe, my father always says about how the Rebbe had gesagt. Rebbe spoke very emotionally, apparently, by Fabring, and how we have shluchim around the world, that we're favors the ganze Welt, but Mam is across the river, it's trucken, it's empty. Right? When my father went in the late, my father went, there was only one other shliach in Manhattan, the west side, Rabbi Kugel. He had a hot dog stand in front of NYU. Right? The whole Manhattan had Mitzrayim, Kemuvan. But it was interesting that Leben Yam is trucken, yeah. So it was something that I ever spoke about, and when I married my wife, Kanikov from Long Island, my Shver said it was the same thing that inspired him to go, that he had a bunch of options all over the world, but he heard the same Fabring that my father heard, as, close to home. And
Which year your father went to Shlichus?
so my father was, a couple of years after he was married, he was working for Tzach, for the Pekishis that were happening here, but he got the bracha the week of my bris, in the summer of Tashin and Alef. And then in Nun Gimel, the first Shabbos that Rebbe spent out of Crown Heights, in the Upper Side, my father said, how could there not be a shliach over there? So immediately, within the month, they moved to the Upper East Side. So this is, and it's not the Mises, those early years. I should say one Mise of the Rebbe is Zim Hiladis, is the father born a Yid. He always says the Mise. The Yid tells the Rebbe he wants $1 for him and his wife. So the Rebbe goes, She says, my wife. The Rebbe says, He says, the woman I'm with. He gives him $1. My father never spoke about this guy to the Rebbe, but apparently he was married to a Shiksa. And so the Rebbe, a Yid sagt, his wife, the Rebbe, the words don't exactly penetrate. But when he speak how the Rebbe, how being close to home and how it's like Rabbi Kalman was speaking before, how there's nothing closer to home than Kranite itself, and everyone in their own personal lives. I was thinking when Rabbi Seligson was speaking, he was saying how the Rebbe said that his kashrus is to learn what I'm learning. So today, some people he said Chita, as he said, and then some people Tanya Balpez, and some people the Indian that Rebbe is learning. So I actually saw in Minus Kodesh, this new thing. It's the Zel Umazev Twitter. 165 characters or less. Entertaining, but of Kedusha, of course, the Rebbe. And there's a minor there. A guy asked the Rebbe, there are all kinds of weird people out there. He asked the Rebbe if he could send him a picture of himself. He wants a picture. The Rebbe should send him a picture. So the Rebbe tells him, Ein ze nog klal. The Rebbe underlines klal. Klal not nog, sort of thing. And the Rebbe says, Kiyem yilmoid, mashani loymid. You should learn, what am I learning? What did the Rebbe say? Parshas HaShavua. That's it. And the Rebbe wrote, Zeh ma'achid shaloy me'erech me'foto. This is a ma'achid. This unites us much more than any photo will.
There's a year
so,
for that? There's a year when the
Minus K.
Every book is another year.
Every book.
the cakes that come out?
Yeah, the case will come out. So the nowadays you pull it up on your phone in a second, up in the ganze Maisa. And everything Rabbi Seligson was speaking about, it can make a person has to be a lunatic. You have to be crazy not to be a fan of the Rebbe. It's actually not a difficult thing to sell the Rebbe to someone. The Rebbe is, right? You have to be crazy not to be a fan of the Rebbe. Rabbi Seligson is telling us stories, rain, shine, winter, snow could be piled 5 feet high. The Rebbe stayed until 12 hours straight by the oil, until late at night. And it's not human. And things that we tell over to Balabatim to inspire them, but we should think about it for ourselves as well. Right? The notion that the Rebbe didn't take 1 day vacation for 42 years is so we could say, that's what we tell people to get them excited. But think about that for a second, what that means. Right? So if someone is, it's not a big deal to be a fan of the Rebbe. I'm a big fan. I'm mamish, ich halt von Rebbe. Right? And the gather of this is how much do I hold of the Rebbe? How much could I describe how amazing the Rebbe is? The real chiddush is, the real uftu, the real word is the Rebbe should be a fan of you. The Rebbe should be a fan of us. We should be a fan of the Rebbe. The Rebbe should have Ru Gidulim Shegidalti. The Rebbe should have nachas from us. And so much so, and I'm afraid to quote a sikha in front of Rabbi Seligson, because I'm going to get slugged up in a second. But I heard the recording, and the Rebbe spoke Chalamayid Sukkis Tashin Beis. The Rebbe Keret that we say we say in the special tefillah of Shalosh Regalim, we say V'yiskayim banu mikdash chassav, to be fulfilled in us that which is written, V'nochal l'bruch Hashem, Ruach Chachma Uvina, Ruach Eitzu Gvura, Ruach Das Yiras Hashem. The whole pasuk that's written in Yeshaya, Perek Yud Alef, regarding Melech HaMashiach. And it should be fulfilled in us. So, Pili Ploim, Hafli V'fella, we're asking the Eibishter that we should be Mashiach, right? V'yiskayim banu. It's Pshat. The Rebbe said that there's a Hiraf in the fact that all the sons of the Tzemach Tzedek had the title of Admur. You know the title Admur. The Rebbe says we learn that Yeder, Darf sich nehmen, and maybe we get the exact Lashonis, the Breitkeit, the Spashtus and the Breitkeit, and the whole persona and the power of an Admur, of a Rebbe. Power of the Rebbe. You have to realize that you are Mashiach. You are the Rebbe. And the Rebbe recognized what a bombshell he just dropped. The Rebbe said, I forgot his exact words, but he said, you become completely shaken when you hear such words being said. But the Rebbe said, this is the tefillah, this is what we say. And the vart really is, bottom line is that it's 120 years, it's the Rebbe's birthday, and if a Yid looks around, talking about shlichus on the Upper East Side, he's a Yidden who never saw the Rebbe. They never saw the Rebbe. And there's many Yidden, believe it or not, who never even heard of the Rebbe. So, for them, what they see when you talk about the Rebbe, what they see is us. We are the Rebbe. If you want to see what is the Rebbe, you're the Rebbe. As far as any bosser, as far as anyone in this world knows or sees, you are the Rebbe. Like the Maisa, we said a Maisa for Shmuel Munkus. The other Bavusta, many Bavusta Maisas, for the Maisa Shmuel Munkus that he hanged himself upside down in front of the shul by the Alter Rebbe. So he said, "What are you doing?" So he said, "By the shoemaker hangs shoes, by the watchmaker hangs watches, and by the Rebbe hangs chassidim." Right? What does the Rebbe do? That makes chassidim. Fact is that if a Yid's looking, he's looking for emes, he's looking for truth. If we don't reflect the emes of the Rebbe, then a person's not going to see the Rebbe in the world. We are the Rebbe in this world right now. And the Rebbe is 120 years old, like the Maisa, Eltim with the Tatas Yaren. Right? That means we have that power to represent it, and you see it all the time. Anyone who's on shlichus and anyone who really just decides to do it. Was when Michoel passed away. So there was a tremendous excitement, right?
Which Michoel?
A few years ago. Georgia. So there was a crazy excitement by the shluchos and so everyone was going crazy. So they said, could we get 1,000 women to start keeping Taras HaMishpacha? 1,000 women. That's good. And my mother, among the other women, was very nesayder. And mamish, anyone she met, she was speaking to. These fraya women, normally, normally you build a relationship first, talk about such private and yarnim, and after a few years, come and about these very personal issues. But she was mamish, first time she's meeting someone, what's going on in the bedroom. And the kids and they hit 1,000 and then they made a 2,000. Unbelievable. But I heard from my mother then, she said that it was the first time that Shetaka believed the Rebbe when he said the world's ready for Mashiach. Because it was unbelievable, the response. She realized that it was her problem. She wasn't ready. People were dying for her to speak to them about it. The second you speak about it, my mother would speak to one woman, another woman would come over and say, could you speak to me? Right? And Shetaka got many, many women to start keeping Taras HaMishpacha. When we have that belief, so to speak, in ourselves, it's not so much a belief in yourself; it's a belief in what we represent, in the fact that the Rebbe is alive, the fact that the Rebbe is truth, just like how the Rebbe represented Hashem. So we represent the Rebbe. And and if a person thinks, "Who am I?" garnished, and many shluchim feel that way, and so on and so forth. But there's actually a mind hack to get over that. On the contrary, it's a life hack. You'll see in a second. that the Rebbe is like the ultimate magician. The chiddush of the Rebbe is not that he takes a bunch of Grace Lamdonim, Grace Goinim, and Tzadikim, and Shemaisa, and he tells them, oh, become a Rav, become a Mashpia, change the world. It's not the chiddush. The chiddush, magician, you have a hat. Voila, there's a bunny here, right? You didn't know, you realize. The Rebbe's chiddush is it takes on nobody. Someone can just learn and garnished, and the Rebbe makes him a revolutionary. The Rebbe makes him that he's now changing. He makes him a pech. He arrives in a city, and before you know it, mikvois and shulin and shiurim. It's the whole. And the more of a shmendrik you are, the less shaykh you are, the more geschmack. Fakert, your mamish who the Rebbe wants. In other words, fakert, dafke you, if you that you can now do it, that you can now be the one who's able to bring the Rebbe's message and able
This
to.
is why you're not a shliach of fish.
Fine, we'll get there. It's not late enough in the night to discuss. Not enough l'chaim, exactly. But the bottom line is like this: the tachlis ultimately, the reality is that the Eibishter in the right at the beginning of Bereishis, Parshas Hashavua, right at the beginning of Bereishis, it says that the Eibishter wanted to make the world midas hakvura. Right, so the Eibishter saw the world can't last. He brought midas hadim. So Chassidus always asks, what's the pshat? What? Midas harachmim is actually the word used, but Chassidus. Chassidus, what do you mean? What did the Eibishter want? He wanted gevura. What's the pshat? The word is what? What's the whole chiddush of Elam Haza? Chiddush is that complete helam behester, complete concealment of godliness, and then the chiddush that even in such a world, right? The geschmack idea is that in Gashmi is that a person should be able to do a chiddush. That's a chiddush. The malach, it's a robot. The Eibishter makes a robot and it sings his praise. Who cares? The chiddush. So the Eibishter wanted complete concealment of godliness. That would be the ultimate taiva of Dirab Tachtenim. Hashem saw the world can last. Midas harachim. What's midas harachim? What does the Alter Rebbe say in Shariach V'Emunah? In other words, when people ask you, the Freya people or Israelis love this question. Why was there miracles in the times of the Midbar and now there's no miracles? Everyone the same question. The answer is the Eibishter doesn't want miracles. It's not the chiddush of Elam Hazeh. But then, if we wouldn't have that period of time, that we could always look back to historically, and Pesach we relive, then we wouldn't have us unhalted. The whole world now, if anyone ever questions the Eibishter, we always have that period of time where open miracles in 40 years in the desert, etc. The tzaddikim in every generation. The tzaddikim are what keep it alive. But my dear friends, let me ask a question. Just think to this for yourself. Did we really think, meaning we did think maybe, but now that we're in retrospect, is it really possible that the Eibishter was not going to get his taiva? Right? Is that really shaykh to Zogin? Ultimately, the Eibishter's taiva is to have a world of only Pashat Yidden. No tzaddikim, no, right? We're living in a world now, Allah Zayin Pashat Yidden. Right? There's no tzaddikim, there's no nothing. It's only us. Of course, the Rebbe is here, but the Vart, this nekuda, that the Rebbe lives through us. In other words, did we internalize Yiddishkeit to the point, did we internalize the messages of Chassidus and of Yiddishkeit, that we are, that Yiddishkeit is not going to be lost on us, that we're ready to make a Dirab Tachtenim, that we're ready for Mashiach. The Eibishter's taiva was to have a world with Midas HaGvura, and in such a world have a Dirab Tachtenim. And right now, we are the fulfillment. The Eibishter, right before Mashiach comes, this is actually the biggest proof. This is the biggest way that we know Mashiach is about to come. Right before Mashiach comes, the Eibishter was not going to let the world not have, his taiva was going to be fulfilled. A world such as our own, in the year 2022, and yet in such a world that we should be connected to the Rebbe, and that we should be Michoel the heroes, and everything, Pashat, because we become so one with it, and we take the breitkeit of the Rebbe himself, and we take that initiative, and we realize that there's no one else to look at. There's no one to rely on. There is no person, and there's no knight in shining armor, as they say, who's gonna, right? You are the savior of humanity. You are Moshiach L'chvei V'atzmei, and the more we realize it, the more we're going to realize exactly what the Rebbe meant, that the world is ready for Moshiach. Okay.
You say that the Rebbe never took vacation. Right?
You're talking about the 5-minute Mesa?
No.
Yeah.
What do you say? My Mechut's father gave to Homeland. Once he came to you know who Homeland, Florida?
Homeland.
Yeah, he had a mice with his son, accident. So he
Oidachman.
Yeah,
Yeah, of course.
Homeland. He got from the Rebbe also. So one time he came to Seligson in Brengen and this, and then he tell to the Talmidim, to the Bethim, he said, I tell you who is the Rebbe. You think you know who is the Rebbe? I tell you who is the Rebbe. He said, the ganze Welt sucht, the Shabbos B'nesser, the Shabbos, das ist der Shabbos, der Rest of Israel, und Bein Israel. כי 6 יום מסע השם את השמיים ואת הארץ, כי 6 יום מסע השם את השמיים, ויום השביעי שבס ואינופש. He said, the Eberster, he created the world 6 days, that's it. בשביעי, vacation. The Rebbe, unsere Rebbe, never took vacation. The Rebbe is 7 days, 24/7, all year round. So this is the Rebbe, what you say. The Rebbe is, the Rebbe is Echer from the Eberster. You say, I don't know the Eberster, I know the Rebbe. The Rebbe is 7/24.
This, what you said, that when we think it's our personal matter, so then it's very hard. We have to build a years-long relationship with people, and only then we're ready to talk to them about certain private.
You think that?
You think that they ever spoke about it himself? Maybe he'll remember. Remember that simple they ever spoke that the year before he approaches somebody on the sign, talking about any Yiddish guy. First he waits until he develops a long relationship with him. Then he walks into his office and he begs, forgive me for mixing into your inyanim. And then he very quickly, in 1 second, blurts out that hey, tefillin or whatever it is, advice via kalachon, and he runs out. And there it says the reason is because you think that Yiddishkeit is your personal Indian. You think that it's your personal Indian. If you realize it's the other's Indian, then you can just go like your mother, like I'm saying.
You just reminded me of another caveat. I spoke the biggest Yetzer Hara. What do you think the biggest Yetzer Hara is? Someone just sent me a caveat. Kisveyad are going around now like it's going out of style. What's the biggest Yetzer Hara?
I have so many to choose from.
Achim Mutzlachim. The Rebbe says it's the only one, but Achim Mutzlachim of the Rebbe's words. The Rebbe says is the Rebbe wrote it actually in English. Apparently Hebrew couldn't capture it. Ha'inyan shall self-pity. Rebbe writes self-pity.
Oh, wow.
Rachamim atzmiyim. And the Rebbe taiches he translates that Kivan Shakadosh Baruch Hu Barani Ba'ifin Kazeh Hashem made me like this. Kivan Shamatzavi Ba'ifin Kach my matziv is like this. Kivan Sharachmanis are like Deli Yisur Mel Kol Ba'elam. Rachmanis is more than anyone in the world. Yef Shalas is Ma'umo Pater Anim Halinian. I can't do anything. I'm Pater from Anim Chulu V'Chulu. And in order that you shouldn't have kindness on him, that ever goes on. Hayitach, and you tell him, and he yishtay, I'm a good person, right? And I can't do anything. And even if you want to say I'm able to and I don't want. It's my nature. My yesh lasses. What can I do? Yeah, I know the tiredness on me, but I'm able to say that. Everybody's a kol and the nekud is you guide them like matzas al taimen, and this is all in yonim and all the pratim. So I think it's we think that yeah, was kind of tanshen, people.
Yeah. Ay 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 ay
You have to say thank you to Rabbi. Rabbi is Mizake. Die ganze Welt mit YouTube.
זום? זום?
The owner from YouTube.
מה do you mean? מה, אתם רואים את זה עכשיו?
Ich habe mal gemacht, also
מה אתה מדבר? איפה? אני שם
verbringe mit
אני...
Schuldo from the headquarters of the
יהודי.
building in my son's Chabad, next to my son's Chabad.
My son-in-law mentioned to me many months ago that in the Shlichus now, he's been here for months, but hopefully we'll be going back to cover it, that on one day, he gets a call, he was right back here, he gets a call from one of the people from this community. He told one of the people that he must have a pair of tefillin in his office. And he brings it to work with him every day. He does go to work early and he davens beforehand, but always seems to have a pair of tefillin with him. And again, this is someone who's as pashut with a capital P or a small p. And pumped one day, in the middle of work, someone's driving a truck down the street, crashes into the pole outside the building, and all the power goes out. And this Yid is in charge of the whole factory, the whole production. He comes running down the outside, sees the person who had crashed into the truck, and he starts yelling at him. He takes a look, he says, wait a minute, do you go to the shul in Lipetsk? He goes, yeah, I'm all. I went there once. He says, 1 minute. You have to come into my office and put on the tefillin. After yelling at him until he realized, he yelled at him, brought him to his office, then spent the next 2 hours to make sure the guy didn't get into trouble.
Hi. For me, it's the most busiest week of the year in my department, in the arcade, in the restaurant, with the programs and everything. So I just got a phone because I have to go to a little emergency, not far from here. That the kashering and they have a difficult. So the Maschpielen bleiben noch viele an mir.
Bis zum Ende.
Oh, אבי, יש מפתח עליך?
Mam się sein a bissl about the Union of Maim Shalom.
למה?
להכשיר, אתה צריך להכשיר משהו?
לא צריך לנעול את הדלת למטה כשמסיימים. סארי.
The Rebbe customarily would take Maim Shalom, Chodesh Nissan, if it was not on Shabbos, of course, And this was on behalf of the Yidden in Eretz Yisrael and in England. The Rebbe would send matzahs, the Rebbe would pay the hours of baking the matzah and all the expenses. And then the Rebbe would send the matzah to Eretz Yisrael, mainly to Eretz Yisrael, primarily. There were also some going to England, but a lot smaller packages than the containers that went to Eretz Yisrael. When the Rebbe would go out from Mayim Shalonu, the Elam would sing the Nigun Keliyata. It was around the lawn of 770. It was packed. It was like, the date line then was 6 o'clock, I remember. I mean, today with the clock, it's a different date line. But upon him, 6 o'clock on Erech, it was like the Shkia time, the Rebbe would come out. A few interesting inyanim that we heard, that I actually saw personally, by the Inyan of Mayim Shalonu, was there was one year the Rebbe came out. I think Seligson was in the Mems, and he came out early. And the Rebbe asked Rabbi Mentlik, who was Mamuna, who was in charge, what's if it's this man, and he told the Rebbe it's early. And so we were watching to see what's going to be now. The Rebbe's going to go back in and come back in again. Well, the Pale Mamas, the Rebbe remained standing there. We never saw the Rebbe in such a matzah, but Al Koponim, figuring what the Rebbe felt like. There was nothing to do. There was no conversation going on. The Rebbe was just standing and waiting for the time to move, to get there. 2 minutes, 3 minutes. And it was mamash very... nobody could tell us how long it took, because when we looked at the Rebbe, it looked like 10 minutes, but lav dafka 10 minutes. But the Rebbe was mamash very, I don't want to say the word restless, but very umruyik, like, because by the Rebbe it wasn't, just time passing without doing anything. The time came, and the Rebbe took Mayim Shalonu. The Rebbe would usually take a small jar and rinse it 3 times and pour in 3 pours, and then the Rebbe would go back to his room. He would thank the Memunim, and the rest they would fill the jars and the big garbage jars, jumbo jars, and they would fill it, and they would take it to the matzah bakery. So there was once a Maisa that I heard a few years ago. It was then the matzah bakery was not in Crown Heights, it was in the east side, the lower east side. I remember that matzah bakery. I remember of it. Yeah, in the Chofs. In the Chofs that they pushed it, and Rabbi Korf, Rabbi Shia Korf, I think, was already in charge then. And it was like a step down. You go in there, it's like a walk-in basement, but not so low. So it was like so it was one Rish Chodesh Nissan that the Rebbe they would bake on Beis Nissan. So it would be shared with Rabbi Elia Simpson. They also, the family Simpson. So the Rebbe felt that that's not the day that he wants to take Mayim Shalom or Rish Chodesh. That year, the Rebbe said that he wasn't comfortable with that. Upon him, usually it would be the same day. But here was the Rebbe said, "Et nicht gehalten, wir sollen nehmen jeden Tag." He didn't explain nothing. Just as upon him, but the Rebbe, since the Rebbe felt that they're basing on that, so the Rebbe came out, he took Mayim Shalom. The Bocher then took the Mayim Shalom, the big jar, and they slept in the east side. In the east side, they slept it with a car, I don't think he went with a train. He went with a car, and then came in there. In fact, as soon as he comes in, he slips, the bottle, everything broke. It's a whiskey gossen. This Bocher felt mamish like Afra de Ara.
It's only one bottle?
It's a mamish tamamera, but I think it wasn't a big elam either. So Akoponim, or maybe two, one. Akoponim, he calls up 770, weinendig, mamish crying. And he says to Rabbi Chodikov, calls up and he's crying, and he's telling Rabbi Chodikov that he pushed it, the battle broke. Rabbi Chodikov doesn't know what to make of it. The Rebbe just took Mayim Shalom. He comes into the Rebbe. The Rebbe hears it, the Rebbe starts laughing. So the Rebbe says, "Ich habe doch gesagt, wir sollen nicht nehmen. Ich habe nicht gehalten, wir sollen nehmen." That I felt you shouldn't be taken that night. Wow. So this is basically, I heard it now a few years ago from young Zeiten. Aber B'choleifen, it's like everything by the Rebbe, the Mayim Shalom, jeder Sache hat sich hier am Schach in Jahren. I mean, by the Rebbe Maim Shalonu was setting the tone. That was his participation, besides the paying and everything, for the matzah in Eretz Yisrael, which came back later from the bakery. They came back to 770. Later, the library. The Rebbe would be mafresh challah for the matzah, and the Rebbe would then see how they're going to the airport. And when the Rebbe looked, you watched the Rebbe watching the van leave. It was like the Rebbe is seeing Orchim leave. He did not take his eyes off that van till it turned on Albany Avenue. Shemem Pasha, the Rebbe was like escorting them. The Alin Yonim comes with it. And then Eretz Yisrael, they distributed the matzah, broke it in pieces. Every one of Anash, Tzach in Israel had the basis, Snifim, so everybody got matzah. But this was in Yom Yuchah. When it came to his own matzah, which was baked on Erev Pesach, in the afternoon, Rebbe, later years, maybe the early years, yeah, but I don't remember seeing from the Lameds even that the Rebbe should take Maim Shalonu on the Yud Gimel Nisan. Pashtus, it was because he was coming from the Eyal late, it was after the Shkia, Yud Gimel Nisan, so B'meila wasn't shaykh. And even when he came earlier, once Rabbi Mentlik asked, the Rebbe said no. Actually, it was there a Maisa with, what's the Heister, Beirish, Heintes der Rebbe in Yisrael, Minsker Rebbe, Shapiro, Beirish Shapiro, Beirish Shapiro. I go on Rebbe to 70 Jahre. He was a Belzer, so he came to take Maim Shalanu. So the Rebbe says, "Jetzt gehen wir davnen a Belzer Mincha." After the Eyal, a Belzer Mincha is a good spot. So upon him, the Rebbe relied completely. The Maim Shalanu, everything from the Rebbe, he relied completely on Rabbi Mentlik and the Bocharim. I was once a Zocher Begedel, Erev Pesach, in the afternoon, after Chatzeis. Those years Chatzeis was 12 o'clock. Today the Elam has no musik this in Yolim. Life is a little easier. Amoli given 9:17 or 9:22. I still remember those times. Was Achilas Chametz. 10:25 Biur Chametz. That would come down 5 minutes earlier before to the incinerator. Chatzeis was 12. Chatzeis Alayla 12. Afikema and everything was a different. I didn't turn the clock till after April. Then you come in Nochamaisa. We turned. Then they start to turn in March. Now Bechlal they want to go back to the old Seder, not to turn Bechlal. I think it was already passed as a law. Akaponim, the word is that 12 o'clock, after 12, Rabbi Mentlik would come with the Bacharim. I was once a Zacha Begedel in those hours helping. You can't describe it in words. Rabbi Mentlik, he given Uismensch. He was like completely in a different world, very tense, very pressured, feeling that the Rebbe's matzah is being baked now. Not only the Rebbe's matzah that he's giving out, matzah that he's going to put in his mouth. And we as Bocharim felt, every matzah we're handling could potentially be a matzah that the Rebbe is going to eat. And it was the chumris of afternoon, Chatzeis, Pesach, Erev Pesach, Chatzeis had its own yomtiv, Akaponim, so it was very fast and efficient. And then they started to come to 770. That's when the Rebbe started to distribute the matzah. There were sometimes people that came for others.
About singing, tell you also about the matzah making?
No, das nicht.
Das Hallo?
Das Hallo ich mit nicht gesehen habe zu sagen.
Montreal, they do that.
Ja, sie steht doch nur. Der Rebbe Shabbat ist gekommen. Gesagt Hallo in Bakery. Pesach noch hat says, also steht. Akoponim, the Rebbe got the matzah started to distribute. Now the matzah till Lamed Zayin, the Rebbe distributed to everybody matzah. And after Lamed Zayin, Lamed Ches and on, the Rebbe started to distribute to kvutzes, the Kelo. Maskirim, secretaries, the owners of the bakery, and the shluchim who were in town, they were leaving. And in addition to that, also from Lamed Ches and on, not only Lamed Ches, my father would get a matzah every year. The Rebbe would say it's Michoel de Menusa, Michoel de Aswasa, food for food. But Lamed Ches, the Rebbe asked, my father got a call that he should come. The Rebbe gave me the shima from there. So it was my father and Dr. Feldman, locals. The rest were Dr. Weiss, Dr. Resnick, they were all from out of town. Pastors, the Rebbe sent it him before. So Lamed Ches, when the Rebbe gave the matzah, the Rebbe asked that everybody should walk out again nach Tachten. He wants to talk with them private. The Rebbe gave each one an envelope.
Who was that?
To the doctors that Pashut was there Lamed Ches from Yatzeres, Ba'alaylahu. And the Rebbe then started to give matzah. An envelope and a matzah to each one.
What do you mean envelope? Something inside there?
Geld. Hat sie gegeben Geld für Shmini Atzeres. Hat sie damals bezahlt. Because that was, the first day Pesach, he started to come in earlier to daven. So like the Rebbe marked, Mishchedes Nissan was Shabbos that year, the Rebbe started to walk home. It was like a new tkufa. Although it wasn't the whole davening. It still took time till Nitzovim, till the Rebbe came in the whole Shabbos Fabring. Akoponim, what happened was that one of the doctors, name is Dr. Richter, he's a cousin with the Kunin family. And he is the one that sent all the machines, Lamed Ches, that Shmini Atzeref from the hospital. He's the director of the Brooklyn Jewish Hospital. Today he has a Psashem Meshuna. Akoponim, so the Rebbe gave each one envelope. So Dr. Richter said, I heard from my father when they walked out, that he told the Rebbe, we don't want to lose the schus that we treated the Rebbe. So the Rebbe says, the schus of treating, you won't lose. But because a doctor, the Gemara says, Asya de Mogin Shavia, a doctor that doesn't take any money, is not worth anything, so b'meila every doctor has to get paid. So the Rebbe paid each one. So Akoponim, this was, the Rebbe wanted, nobody should be there by the, interessant. And then the Rebbe would continue every year a giving matzah. It was 1 year, a personal experience. It was Mem Dalet. My father had a maisa with the hip, Kislev, and it was a Iberiyar. So in the hospital, in traction, his foot got swollen up, everything in the hospital. That's the best place to get sick. And he couldn't walk for months. You believe in the Haim, it was like a swollen. Erev Pesach was the first time, it was the Iberiyar that he's coming to the Rebbe for matzah. There was something important to him. He still had the cane, and before he went into Gal Nidna Tachten, he threw away the cane. He didn't want the Rebbe to see the cane. Okay. When he came in, Rabbi Klein was walking out of the room, the Rebbe's room, and he saw my father's here. He didn't see him for 5 months, and he immediately notified the Rebbe. So the Rebbe came out. I think we were standing at the entrance of Gal Nidna Tachten. The Rebbe gave my father a matzah, and the Rebbe gave me a matzah. And then the Rebbe says, Vartzu, wait. The Rebbe went back, he said, I'm going to also get a prusa, a shtikul matzah, a prusa. To give my father, in addition to a whole one, he also gave him a prusa, a shtikul matzah. I found later in Tikkun Ezeiah, there's a whole inyan, a mile of a prusa, lechameni, lechamda, that's a inyan. So that was it. And the Rebbe would tell him, sometimes the Rebbe would tell him that you'll eat a matzah, and so hatzlacha in refuah. So it was 1 year that my father told the Rebbe that Hen Lieberman, that was Lamed Hey, it was his last year. He was Nifter Tainus Esther Lamed Vov. So my father told the Rebbe that Rab Hendel he can't eat matzah. So my father says he gave him an eitzah, he should crush the matzah. So that year the Rebbe told my father to come also, not only the Erev, he came at a Pesach, he should also come the second night, which was a chidush.
When you come the second night?
Second night Pesach, before they say that. He should wait, for more matzah. No, the Rebbe ate upstairs. After Maida, before the Rebbe went home. And my father came. Before that, he prepared in his mind that Bechlal it says, that the Indian of matzah is Michoel of Amunah, Michoel of Fuah. So it's the first night, the first night is Michoel of Amunah, second night is Michoel of Refuah. And besides a person, the Chiddush is, the Bhakti, the beer is at the door, when a person is sick, later comes to the union of Amunah. But sometimes if L'chatchila Amunah, he's L'chatchila well. So he asked, my father as the Rebbe, come to Chuiz that the Refuah is as the second night. That this is, you understood that, that's why the Rebbe wanted to give the second night. So the Rebbe said, B'etzem are both nights, both in Yonim. The advice is that each night is a different dogush. I mean, we didn't understand. Because now Yom it says second night is before. Yeah, but there was one time after Fabringen Tavshin Yud Gimel, the Rebbe asked whoever needs refuah should come from Matzah after the Fabringen 1:30 in the morning. Fabringen 1:30 in the morning was one of the most memorable Fabringens. I feel from the was gedenken nicht andere in Jahren. It was an amazing Fabringen. 1:30 in the morning.
Oh, second night again?
Yeah, no lechayim, gar nicht. The Rebbe came in with his thin hagoda, the time in Michoel, talking about the chof, still lamed. The Rebbe came in and started to speak. Anigen, asicha, anigen. All the people, Nash, we knew there's a Fabrengen.
Ah.
It wasn't a surprise. It was 20 years. People came. Versteht sich,
After 4 cups of wine.
versteht sich the Nisoyen of after I said that and everything wasn't easy. I'm not going to discuss what was taking place by Fabrengen,
They say the Rebbe kept his eyes
but the
closed.
Rebbe closed his eyes by this Fabrengen. He would speak.
By Sichas also.
Yeah, by the Sichas. He closed his eyes, Pashit, that
Nicht gewollt sehen.
had nicht gewollt sein, the Elam Adan. And then there was a group of Chevre that would come walking from Borough Park. The Chevre, Lubavitch Bocharim, Rosenfeld, Yarmush.
Wer ist? Der Luche?
Was? No, Vater Fabrengen.
Ah.
Noch ein Seder. Can't drink anything, nothing. There was not. Sie sind gekommen again, Rosenfeld, Yarmush, Rubashkin, a ganze Gruppe. Rosenfeld from Borough Park.
Posner's also.
Huh?
Posner's.
The what?
Posner.
Goldschmidt? Was?
Posner's.
Posner. These Chevre lived in Borough Park. So they all walked in. Aderech like for the Maimer Shluas, 3 in the morning. They would walk in and go back. When it was a Shabbos Fabrengen, it was a different Seder. Shabbos Fabrengen, sometimes they didn't know there's a Fabrengen, so they would make up in the circle there, between Borough Park and Crown Heights. There were Chevre from Crown Heights. If they told them there is no Fabrengen, so they would walk back home. Otherwise, they would walk with them. They would walk, to Crown Heights. This was a simon sometimes made up. It's mahalach, but these Chevre were like, really committed group. 20, 25 Chevre, I would figure, Landau, no Chevre. They lived in Borough Park, so the Pashit was a big Mesiras Nefesh coming. You can't drink water, nothing. Kupet Zigein, that's in Fabrengen. So the Rebbe Fabrengen till 4:15, the second night Pesach. And after the Fabrengen, the Rebbe would go home. I remember yet how the Rebbe went home on Eastern Parkway, like usual. Sometimes he went to Union, he met the Rebbetzin on the way and walked home together because she waited upstairs to say that. So when the Rebbe walked home, they were singing the Gunim. And the street was so quiet, Eastern Parkway, that you can hear the echo across the street. There was no cars. So you can possibly there. It was mamish like a whole different experience. Shacharis was 10 o'clock. The only time that the Rebbe's minyan, Shacharis, was affected, the time was affected, was only when they turned the clock. They turned the clock. You couldn't turn the clock. In the middle of October, the end of October, in the middle of Simchas Torah, they turned the clock. Chevre said l'chaim, so I didn't know a difference what time it is. But the Rebbe came in according to the new time.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's what they announced. Als het geblieben allemaal in kop, the new time, the Schluss werden, wie viel zeggen, and the Hakaf was finished 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. The Rebbe would come in 10 o'clock with a niggin. We saw on the mems.
Yeah, Shmini Atzeret, Simchas Torah, when it was Shabbos Sunday.
Right. But Simchas Torah, in the morning he would come in with his father's niggin. He would turn around to the Elam, would start singing his father's niggin before Shacharis. And then the talis, Mama still the talis started to like.
Remember, we were saying that the Rebbe standing restless, it reminded me of, I wasn't there personally, but at the little volume of Zalman Hechtel of Shalom on a Friday afternoon.
Oh, yeah, by the wall, by the
staying outside.
Right. And he sent everybody in.
Sent everybody in, standing there by himself.
He sent the mosquitoes in, everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah. He said, Klar, that they don't belong there. Everybody should go in. The Rebbe says, Mela, there is a Kayan. One of the answers is a Kayan. Yeah. That's on the Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon, and late.
Late. They came back right before, right?
Chatila, they were planning to, it was Nifta Thursday night in Chicago.
Thursday night?
Yeah, it was Thursday night, so they were going to do it on
Yeah,
Sunday.
but then that's why the Rebbe made a condition. That if they bring him Friday, he's going to the Beis HaChaim. So the Rebbe went to the Beis HaChaim. Friday. It's a summer, but it was late.
Yeah. Till they got
Pay
a
over,
flight, I
yes.
think they missed one flight, whatever, till they got here.
Yeah.
A few times that you see the Rebbe, don't learn it. A handful of times that you see like the Rebbe's
Yeah.